or it is cloudy over in Brandon. It's minus 10 there. And we have in Thompson this morning a clear sky, and it's minus 33. So once again, very cold. Winnipeg's going to be a high of minus 6 today with increasing cloud early this morning. Your morning show is on until 8:37 a.m. Let's say hello to the team. Good morning, Abby Adiyemi behind the controls. Abby's our senior tech, and we'll be on the air covering the forecast through the show. In addition, sitting by Abby is Mr. Darren Marash, who produces our YouTube stream. Say hello to him there if you're watching the show, and we hope that you do. There's always additional visuals to the stories you hear here on the radio. And Corey Funk is here also. He's directing the program as always this morning, and he's going to be in talking about your morning commute, which could be just a touch icy underfoot. We had a bit of a dusting of snow in Winnipeg, and of course, we've had partly covered highways in northern Manitoba the last couple of mornings too. So check 511 before you head out. 2 minutes to 6 o'clock. Heather Wells is here with our headlines.
Good morning. Well, the NDP majority in the Manitoba legislature is one seat larger today. Dawson Trail MLA Bob Lagasse is leaving the Progressive Conservative Caucus to sit as an independent. Lisa Dick was the president of the PC's Dawson Trail Constituency Association. She says it takes a lot of strength for him to go it alone and focus solely on the needs of his constituency. We'll hear more about that coming up. As well, several dozen demonstrators rallied in downtown Winnipeg again last evening in a show of support for Israel, the United States, and the Iranian people. We'll take you to that rally in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
All right. Thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
Well, you might be up and communicating on TikTok, and you don't have to delete the app because it will be staying in Canada. We're going to hear more about the new rules, though, that have been put in place to protect users and kids, and we'll hear more about that decision, which came down yesterday, so stay tuned. Also, new data suggests that Gen Z is putting a premium on mental health, and the Gen Z men in particular are increasingly willing to seek professional health. So that's a shift in habits. We're going to check with a psychologist about what is happening in this country around those stats. And then a little bit later in the program, we have ongoing coverage of MAID. Yesterday, you might have heard a story of a woman in Steinbach who was told she couldn't get MAID, and she didn't know why.
Garvey Bailey in for Tom Power. The legendary puppeteer Ronnie Burkett is back with a new show. Little Willie is a provocative and comedic take on Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Ronnie is here to talk about why he wanted to take on the classic tragedy and explain how audiences are making the puppets come alive.
I think it's about longing.
Q this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Idil Musa. Iran is stepping up its attacks across the Middle East, and the U.S. and Israel are launching counterattacks. Video posted online shows smoke billowing out of a building. Several reports say it was an Israeli strike on a police station in the Iranian city of Tabriz. Iran is striking targets in Israel and several Gulf states, and it appears to be ready to take action at home too. The CBC's David Common joins me now from Amman, Jordan. David, what is the latest out of Iran?
Let's start with the message to Iranians themselves. The police chief in the country saying protesters will be dealt with the same way as the enemy. In other words, they will use lethal force should anybody try to rise up against this regime. Militarily, Iran saying it has launched what it calls its 35th wave of operations. They have targeted Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain, primarily with missiles. Often, Iran says, targeting American military installations, but we have seen multiple incidents over the past nearly 2 weeks at this point of them targeting civil infrastructure as well in those Gulf states.
Israel has its focuses split on two fronts given the ongoing conflict with Hezbollah in Lebanon. What can you tell us about that?
And it is very important to note that this is a conflict that does not directly involve the Americans. It has long been a conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. This is in some ways just the latest chapter. But when we have seen previous chapters, they have tended to target Hezbollah strongholds in South Beirut, a densely populated city, but it became somewhat predictable. In the last 24 hours, Israel has been targeting central Beirut, and that has thrown a number of Lebanese people into waves of fear because they don't know where is safe anymore. Families who have been displaced by airstrikes have been taking shelter in schools, stadiums, and other public buildings. Some 700,000 people in that country have been told to flee.
The CBC's David Common in Amman, Jordan. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are growing fears Iraq is being drawn into the U.S.-Israeli war with Iran. Pro-Iranian militias there are increasing attacks against U.S. and Kurdish targets. Margaret Evans in Erbil has more.
The risk of another front in the conflict opening up here is impacting already shaky relations between the Iraqi Kurds, who enjoy regional autonomy, and the federal government in Baghdad they say discriminates against them. Attacks on Erbil by Iranian-backed militias operating in Iraq have increased since the start of the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran, turning the spotlight on Iraq's mainly Shia government and its links to the militias, some of which have been trained and funded by Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps. We blame the Iraqi government, says Dilshad Shabab, a senior advisor to the Kurdish regional presidency, because they're not taking any serious measures. There are 2 American bases in Iraqi Kurdistan that have come under regular drone and missile fire, as have Kurdish Iranian opposition groups based on the Iraqi side of the border. Civilian targets have also been hit, and the U.S. Embassy has warned that hotels could be under threat. Shabab suggests U.S. forces themselves are already in action against the militias. They're protecting themselves, he says, and they're protecting others. But he also says the problem won't disappear until the government in Baghdad acknowledges its ties to the militias and reins them in. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Erbil, Northern Iraq.
At least 3 commercial ships in the Strait of Hormuz are damaged after coming under attack. British maritime officials say the vessels were hit by some sort of projectile. At least one of them is on fire. Officials say all crews have been safely evacuated from ships. There is no word on who fired the projectiles, but Iran has been vowing to block traffic through this strategic route. The U.S. military says it's destroyed 16 Iranian mine-laying ships in the strait. A 4th MP has crossed the floor of the House of Commons to join the Liberal ranks, but this time it is an NDP MP. Laurie Idlout's switch of party allegiance is bringing the Carney government very close to majority status. Janice McGregor is in our parliamentary bureau. Janice, there were signs this floor crossing was in the works.
Yep, sure were. Laurie Idlout abstained on last fall's budget vote, saying there were things in it for her riding that she could support, and she didn't want to trigger an election. In a statement last night, she cited the new threats against Canada's sovereignty, pressures on the well-being of people throughout the North, as a reason that Canada needs, in her words, a strong and ambitious government that makes decisions, she said, with Nunavut, not about Nunavut. And that's why, she said, after much personal reflection, and she said the encouragement from her community, she decided to join the government caucus, calling Mark Carney Canada's first Prime Minister from the North. Now, when our colleagues at CBC North asked her about floor crossing rumors in January, she said she'd been asked to consider it by both Liberals and some of her own constituents. But she decided at that point she couldn't. Apparently the time was now. And with the Prime Minister heading north of the Arctic Circle this weekend to watch some Norwegian-led NATO exercises, recruiting Nunavut's MP, well, sure boosts the momentum around that work.
Janice, it was actually the NDP that broke this news last night.
Yes, interim leader Don Davies got out ahead of whatever big reveal the Liberals might have planned for this morning, saying New Democrats were disappointed and she should put this to voters, resign, run again if she wants to be a Liberal. Just last week, Idlout spoke at a leadership event for the Avi Lewis campaign. Now, a seat that's flip-flopped 3 ways in recent elections is back in the Liberal column, poised to help tip the government into a majority. And the bad news for New Democrats may not stop here, because it's only Quebec MP Alexandre Boulris is openly considering stepping down to run in a provincial election later this year, putting his Montreal seat back on the table for the Liberals too.
Janice McGregor in Ottawa, thank you.
You're welcome.
A major ice storm is forecast to hit southern parts of Ontario and Quebec. As much as 30 millimeters of freezing rain could fall over the next 24 hours, and it could affect Ottawa through to Montreal and up to Quebec City. Cendrix Bouchard with Hydro-Quebec says crews are on standby.
And also making sure that we have all the equipment required. We're thinking about, electric lines, transformers, poles as well.
Many school boards in eastern Ontario and parts of Quebec have already cancelled classes. The City of Montreal says it's ready to activate emergency measures if necessary. The Canadian Cancer Society says colorectal cancer screening should start earlier than the recommended age of 50. Today, the organization is updating its official position. It's also calling on provinces and territories to get on board, saying the change will save lives. The CBC's Tashana Reid has the details.
I was diagnosed with rectal cancer at the age of 34.
Now 36, Melissa Groff, a married mom of 3, is battling stage 4 cancer. She shared her story with other cancer survivors and advocates on Parliament Hill. All of them urging provinces and territories to lower the screening age for colorectal cancer.
It's time that Canada makes that move.
The Canadian Cancer Society agrees. The organization has officially changed its position, echoing the calls to lower the screening age to 45 for people with average risk. They say the move is based on evidence that younger adults are increasingly being diagnosed with colorectal cancer, and more often at later stages of disease. Brandon Purcell is an advocacy manager for the charity.
Someone in that 45 to 50 age cohort is now 2 to 2.5 times more likely to be diagnosed than in previous generations.
Currently, screening programs across Canada start at 50 up to 74 years old, unless a patient is high risk. Dr. Shadi Ashmala is a surgical oncologist at Sunnybrook's Cancer Centre in Toronto.
It is not a disease of the elderly anymore.
Screening is done using a fecal immunochemical test known as a FIT test. A stool sample is sent to a lab where it is checked for blood. If positive, or for patients with symptoms, a colonoscopy is recommended.
We know this is a curable, treatable disease, always if caught early enough.
In recent years, Australia, the United States, and Japan all have lowered their screening age, something advocates say they hope will happen here. Tashana Reid, CBC News, Toronto.
And that is the latest from World Report. I'm Idil Musa. This is CBC News.
Interesting, right? We just did that interview a few weeks ago with Cancer Care Manitoba about those FIT tests. If you missed that, by the way, really interesting how they work. You can check it out on our CBC Listen app. Good morning. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at Information Radio. We're live in downtown Winnipeg on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on that app and on YouTube. Into the forecast and what's happening on your morning commute in just a moment. Right now, I want to mention what's coming up this hour. You might have heard yesterday, TikTok will stay in Canada, but with new rules. So we're going to walk through what some of those are and how they could impact you if you are a TikToker. In addition, this hour on the show, for years the message has been that mental health matters, and it appears Gen Z is taking that message to heart. We're going to hear about their increasing use of mental health supports. This is a shift from generation to generation, so stay tuned for that coming up this hour as well. Heather Wells has a busy news run today. What are you leading with, Heather?
Good morning. Yes, 2 people have died after donating plasma at private clinics in Winnipeg. Health Canada says it received reports of 2 fatal adverse reactions at Grifols in Winnipeg in under 4 months. This includes a 22-year-old international student at the University of Winnipeg. A hematologist, Dr. Ryan Zarachansky, says serious complications from giving plasma are incredibly rare. So we will hear more about this story from our CBC I-team coming up. As well, the mother of a woman who went missing in Western Manitoba a decade ago hopes the RCMP's drive for fresh information will bring her closure. Laureline Bone was reported missing 10 years ago this week. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 6:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Abby, good morning. How's the forecast looking?
Yeah, good morning, Marcy. Well, much of the southern part of the province waking up to a quiet but a bit of cold morning. The north, some regions traveling towards the Churchill to Dole region, we're still seeing those severe, life-threatening deep freeze. We're talking about wind chills in the valleys between minus 45s and minus 50s this morning. We still have that yellow warning in effect for Brochet and Tudula Lake. We're looking at wind chills in the valleys of minus 45 this morning, which means a risk of frostbite in a minute. Though this should kind of bring some kind of relief later this morning. And in the southern part of the province, no warnings, but we're still seeing wind chills in the valleys of minus 20s to minus 25s. Winnipeg right now, we're hovering around minus 15. There's just a slim chance of light snow developing later this morning into the afternoon period. And we warm up to about minus 5 today. We're still trying to hit that seasonal of minus 2 for this time of the year.
Mark Close. All right. Thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Corey Funk, good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, highways are looking okay so far. It seems like the worst is up just around Lynn Lake this morning. The poor visibility and covered conditions, according to Manitoba 511. Here in the city, haven't heard of any major issues out there, but if you are walking your bike and you're driving, you see something, you can give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number, 204-788-3093.
Well, Tick can keep talking in Canada. The platform now faces stricter rules, though, to protect Canadian users. Melanie Joly announcing this on Monday, that the federal government's going to track compliance. Now, this is a big change from the government's previous position on the social media platform on TikTok. In November of 2024, an industry minister ordered TikTok's business dissolved, citing national security risks. David Gerhardt is head of the Department of Computer Science at the University of Manitoba, and he, of course, is in Winnipeg. Good morning.
Morning, Marcy.
So how did they go from national security risk, shut it down, to, go ahead, keep it open, just some rules in place?
Well, these national security risks were all about the way that ByteDance, the company that runs TikTok, the way that it was handling its data. And so after that initial request or rule expectation to shut it down, ByteDance challenged that, and there was a sort of a hold on that for a while. And in the meantime, Ottawa and ByteDance were in conversations about whether there was something different that they could do. And so now ByteDance has agreed to a list of constraints that include better data handling, also attention to the way that the platform interacts with youth, Canadian content, oversight, a bunch of other stuff. So with all of those in place, Ottawa has agreed that it's reasonable for ByteDance to continue operations.
The new rules are meant to protect user data and younger users, as you've alluded to here, David. Ottawa is going to track compliance, as I said. What does that actually mean for people that use the app?
So for people who use the app, day-to-day operations should not really change, right? The same infinite scroll of cat videos will continue. Just the way that the data that is collected and manipulated will be changed sort of behind the scenes. The changes to the way that ByteDance and TikTok might interact with youth could affect some user operations. So if you're using a youth account, depending on how ByteDance chooses to actually implement that, some features of your feed may be different. Some videos may or may not be available. But for the most part, it should be the same TikTok that we've come to know.
How much of a role did politics potentially play in this, do you think?
I'm sure this is part of the conversation. The 15 million or so people in Canada use the app. It's incredibly popular, and not just for scrolling videos, but also companies use this to interact with their customers and their clients. Content creators use it to produce things that people watch, and therefore they make money on it. So it's a very popular platform in a lot of different ways. And I'm sure there was conversations around like just shutting this down is a problem because people use it. They've come to expect that it can exist, just like these other social media companies. And so finding some way to encourage the companies that make these apps to be better citizens, to comply more with our expectations on how users' data might be used.
Remind us how it's different in Canada than what we've put in place compared to how the U.S. is handling TikTok.
So in the States years ago, there was a law passed that said TikTok had to be sold to an American owner of some kind, right? Whether that was an individual or a consortium of companies. And that just never happened. There was lots of conversation around, well, we have this law that requires it to be sold. Why hasn't it been sold yet? But in the last few months, TikTok operations in the States have agreed to be sold 80% to a consortium of private equity firms. And so that's the way that they've sort of handled this data problem, is that if it's owned by American company, then it's okay, I guess. That's sort of their approach to it.
You already said that the users of TikTok may not be so affected in Canada by the changes. What about the creators that you're talking about, or those that make, influencers, or those that make their business is really reliant on TikTok?
So this, I think, will actually end up being an advantage, an opportunity, because the new ways that ByteDance will be operating should include, or supposed to include, differential supports for Canadian creators, Indigenous creators, Francophone creators. And so if there's a person who operates in Canada that fits that description, there may be additional resources for them. There may be opportunities for them to build content in a different way. And so if somebody is in that collection, there may be differences in things that they can do, a different strategy they might approve. But in general, again, content creators should in general be able to do the same things that they have done on the platform.
It sounds like CRTC rules. So when you apply, the equivalent to broadcasting, where there has to be a certain amount of Canadian content, and there could be that they're applying this now to the social media platforms, which really is the next form of it's not broadcasting, but it's streaming, but it's the same thing. Have we seen that before, that sort of potential advantage to create more Canadian content for specific makers in the social sphere?
So yes, YouTube had a big conversation about this, and there were the previous approach of the Canadian government in this context was to require social media apps to include some proportion of Canadian content, and YouTube was highly resistant to this. They said you can't make us change your feed. You can't make us influence what content goes into the feed. And maybe they could, maybe they couldn't, but there was a lot of resistance to that. This new approach rather supports creators who will produce that content, and then presumably the content will find its way up to the top of the feed more organically. It remains to be seen exactly how this will be implemented, but the supports that seem to be in place with this new deal are going to be more external to the platform, right? Direct support for content creators in these categories to actually make the content, and then it'll
find its way. All right, David, thank you very much. Always appreciate having you on these sorts of issues to sort through them with us. Thank you.
All right, you're very welcome.
That's David Gerhardt making sense of TikTok staying in Canada, the new rules, how they could affect you as a user or a content creator. David's the head of the Department of Computer Science over at the University of Manitoba.
Local news is in decline across Canada, and this is bad news for all of us. With less local news, noise, rumors, and misinformation fill the void, and it gets harder to separate truth from fiction. That's why CBC News is putting more journalists in more places across Canada, reporting on the ground from where you live, telling the stories that matter to all of us. Because local news is big news. Choose news, not noise. CBC News.
Okay, let's talk about reporting on the ground from where you live. If you live in Brandon, we're coming for you. We're going to have 2 live morning shows from Brandon at the end of the month. Well, actually, technically the beginning of next month. In the last week of March, beginning of April. Corey and I are going to be making the trip out, and so we would love to see you. It is spring break. It is Royal Manitoba Winter Fair. We're going to do one show in the city at Chez Angela. That's now been confirmed. And so that we're looking forward to that. And also we're going to do a second show, location to be announced around the Royal Fair. But please consider pitching a story to us. What do you think we should share when we're in Brandon? So you can write to us at radio893@cbc.ca. We're available there. Or you can call the listener line at 204-788-3205. It is 6:21 a.m. Yesterday at this time, we were watching this news develop, and today we're trying to get a better understanding of what happened in Toronto. Police there are investigating what they're calling a national security incident. This was the early morning shooting yesterday at the U.S. consulate in Toronto. At this point, authorities say it's unclear of what happened is, if what happened rather, is linked to the U.S.-led war on Iran. Now, either way, some experts say the incident shows gaps in Canada's security infrastructure. Christian Luprecht is one of those experts. He's a security expert and professor at Royal Military College and Queen's University. Here's a little bit of his conversation with News Network host Andrew Nichols.
So it's tragic because states have an obligation to protect the diplomatic missions of other states. And it suggests that Canada was not able to effectively protect the diplomatic mission of Canada's single most important ally and single most important strategic relationship. And that is not going to reflect well among all the people in Washington who are already deeply concerned about the weaknesses on national security that they've repeatedly touted in this country when it comes to organized crime, to financial crime, to fentanyl and the like. So this will likely have broader repercussions. And we need to, I think, reflect on why is it that we're unable to meet our international obligations, and what is it that we need to do to make sure that, in particular, entities of other states can rest assured that Canada has their best interests at heart.
What does that mean in terms of how it will be investigated by calling it a national security incident?
That means you're able to marshal additional resources so that you've met the threshold where, on the one hand, you can bring in multiple agencies. They can share information more effectively amongst themselves as part of this investigation. It'll make it somewhat easier for them to get production orders and to get warrants in the course of this investigation. But I think ultimately we need to understand that I see this as an intelligence failure. That ultimately, assigning individuals to safeguard physical entities, we don't have enough resources to deploy to all the installations we would want to safeguard. So what are we going to do to invest effectively in intelligence? And I know politicians love to announce additional frontline resources, but it actually turns out we don't need frontline resources. We need intelligence capacity that is able to identify individuals who are planning to conduct themselves in an illegal or criminal manner, in particular when it comes to following through or supporting violent extremism. We've done this reasonably effectively when it comes to certain types of terrorism, but I think we are still too much focused on Salafi jihadi type terrorism, and perhaps we're not sufficiently focused on other forms and manifestations of violent extremism. That despite, of course, the repeated warnings by the Canadian Security Intelligence Services and other Five Eyes intelligence services of the rise of politically, ideologically, and motivated violent extremism across our countries.
So that was part of a conversation with Christian Luprecht, who is a security expert and professor at Royal Military College and Queen's University, talking there with CBC News Network host Andrew Nichols. Toronto police say regarding yesterday and that early morning shooting at the U.S. consulate in that city, no one was injured. It is, though, too early in the investigation to provide a possible motive. It is 7:25 a.m. on 89.3 FM. Thanks for being with us this morning. It is Wednesday. I gotta remind myself of the day here. March 11th, and in Winnipeg today, our current temperature this morning, at least to start, -13. Winds are calm, pretty similar to yesterday. A little chillier. Brandon is cloudy right now. It is -10. The cold spot in the province is Lynn Lake. It's -37. Melita is your warm spot at -8. Well, we have a little bit of music. We like to play early morning local artists and get them on the radio so you can check out their music. And you can check out a whole album from Winnipeg's Dominique Adams because she released it earlier this year in 2026. Her new album's called To Keep, and here's a track from it. It's called Would I. Winnipeg's Dominic Adams and her song Would I? Her new album came out earlier this year.
Ant-sized ads promoting a marvelous miniature superhero.
No, I didn't steal anything. I was returning something I stole.
A billboard for an action movie actually dripped sweat.
Ew.
And a film Saved by a Beetle got banned and still was a box office success.
I'm not the Messiah!
Creative movie marketing on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland. And on demand on CBC Listen.
I'm glad someone said you. Now I want to Google, though, the billboard that drips sweat. We're not going to be doing that today in Manitoba. Everyone's below zero. High -6 today in the city. We'll have a regional forecast look coming up after your news. Also, after the news at 6:30, we're going to hear from Christely Ramlikan, as we do every day, with her business report. Today, she has news about what is happening potentially with airline tickets. So the price of fuel is driving up the price of airline tickets. We're going to hear more about that and how it's affecting things. The price of oil, of course, remains elevated with the war in the Middle East right now. And then Christely also has a story about Meta with another social network in its portfolio. So we're going to hear more about that still ahead on the show. I'm Marcy Mark, who said this is Information Radio. You're listening on CBC this morning on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on that app, or you might be watching the stream on YouTube. If you are, make sure you say hello to our team in our control room, Darren and Corey and Abby. We'll hear from Corey and Abby with your next weather and traffic after your CBC News from Manitoba.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is -13. It is another cool late winter day in Winnipeg. Increasing clouds this morning and then clearing this afternoon. Today's high -6. CBC has learned of 2 fatal adverse reactions at a private plasma clinic in Winnipeg. Experts say giving plasma is usually safe, and 2 deaths in under 4 months is unprecedented. CBC I-Team's Michelle Allen has the story.
A CBC News investigation found 2 people died in under 4 months after selling their plasma at Grifols in Winnipeg. Health Canada said it received reports of 2 fatal adverse reactions. Friends of 22-year-old Rodiat Alabetti say her heart stopped at the clinic that pays for plasma. She died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital.
It would give us a lot of closure to know what actually happened.
Mary Ann Chica is one of Alabetti's friends. Health Canada says it's still assessing the reports. It hasn't found a link between plasma donation and the death. In a statement, Grifols said it had no reason to believe that there's a correlation between the donor's passing and plasma donation. Hematologist Dr. Ryan Zarychansky says plasma donation is usually incredibly safe.
The odds of someone, or the probability of someone getting very seriously harmed by donating plasma is like getting struck by lightning. Like, it's that uncommon.
He says 2 deaths in under 4 months raises questions. Michelle Allen, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The Manitoba NDP are singing the praises of a former adversary now that he is leaving the PC caucus. Dawson Trail MLA Bob Lagasse says he butted heads with opposition leader Abi Khan, but he would not explain further. It comes just days after Richard Pershot became the latest PC MLA to announce he won't seek re-election. NDP Health Minister Uzoma Asseguera praises Lagasse for deciding to represent his constituents as an independent.
The bottom line is we're seeing a lot of disruption in the PC caucus. We're seeing people announce they're not going to seek re-election, announce that they're not going to serve as a PC caucus member. These are big announcements. It takes courage to take those positions.
PC leader Abi Khan says he respects Lagasse's decision but denies it has anything to do with his leadership. The mother of a woman who went missing a decade ago says she is desperate for closure. Lorleen Bone was reported missing 10 years ago this week. The 31-year-old last spoke with her mother 10 days before. RCMP are asking for tips to solve her disappearance. Evelyn Chartrand is Bone's mother.
Been having bad dreams and bad thoughts because her birthday was January 18th, and then February came around the corner. I felt more worse. I wish somebody would come forward and tell me where she is so I could have a closure.
Anyone with information about Bone's disappearance or details about the days leading up to it is asked to call RCMP or Crime Stoppers. A 46-year-old man assaulted by a security guard at the downtown Dollarama faces new charges for threatening a different guard. Winnipeg police were called early Monday to the Radisson Hotel on Portage. Officers say a man who was asked to leave the entrance pulled out a knife, threatening a security guard. Police arrested a suspect in the area minutes later. A source says this is the same man seen in a video getting beaten up by a security guard at Dollarama after being accused of stealing. The man now faces additional charges of possession of a weapon and failing to comply with a probation order. Standing with the people of Iran. Several dozen demonstrators near Portage and Main last evening outside the U.S. consulate, people chanting thank you to the United States and Israel, waving flags from Canada, Israel, and the United States, as well as former Iranian flags linked to opposition groups. Mona Saidi left Iran in 2020 and still has family back home.
And they say, Trump act now, President Trump act now for the finish that dictator regime in our country. We came to the rally to be their voice for our people.
Saidi says so far her family in Iran is safe from the American-Israeli attack. She says she worries more about the dangers of the Iranian regime. You can hear the latest on the conflict in the Middle East coming up on World Report at 7. A new investigation by animal rights advocates shows horses being flown for slaughter in Japan continue to suffer injuries, illness, even death. Caitlin Mitchell at Animal Justice says they obtained documents from the Japanese government and Canadian Food Inspection Agency. They found nearly 250 cases of injury and illness and at least 9 deaths in 18 shipments between 2024 and 2025.
The records are clear that they're transport related. Stress from transport, dehydration, horses collapsing on the plane and having such bad injuries that they have to be euthanized right after they landed.
Mitchell is calling on Ottawa to ban live horse exports for slaughter. The CFIA says animal health after arrival is Japan's jurisdiction. Well, the Winnipeg Jets were on a roll. Morgan Barron in the second period on TSN. The first goal of the game against the Anaheim Ducks, but those Ducks came back hard and fast, scoring 3 goals in under 2 minutes. In the end, the Jets lose 4-1 to the Ducks. Head coach Scott Arniel.
We laid a big fat egg. We didn't execute. We didn't compete on pucks. Chase the game. Chase the whole game. It was just, they had the puck most of the night, and when we did have it, we turned it over.
Arniel admits he was surprised his team couldn't find their game after such strong performances in every game since the Olympic break. The Jets now get set to host the New York Rangers tomorrow night. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Oh, inconsistency is so frustrating in sport, right?
Yeah, and you know what? And he says he was really surprised to see how they played. They really didn't get the puck very often. It was always the Anaheim Ducks who controlled that game.
This is the dumbest comparison, but I play old lady volleyball.
Yeah.
We're the worst. But honestly, at the beginning of the season, our first round robin, we won most of the games, and then the second round robin, we lost most of the games.
You just fell apart, or what?
I don't know. It's the same people. So that's what I'm thinking. That's in my mind this morning. But yeah, when it happens to your professional sports team, it's very different stakes, Heather. We don't have any fans coming to watch us, as you can imagine. Bit of exercise on a Monday night. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
If you're trying to get a bit of an exercise out there this morning, should be pretty decent if you're out for a morning run. You kind of want it to be a little bit brisk. But if you're going to be standing still at any of the bus stops, especially if you're in the north, you're going to be layered up. So Abby's here with our regional forecast. That's my introduction, Abby.
Yes, looking across the regions, the cold is still a theme in the northern part of the province. We have the warning still holding Brochet and Tudela Lake this morning, where we're still tracking wind chills in the valleys of -45. Hence, that's yellow warning still holding things down there. Means frostbite in minutes and exposed skin, so take it easy. While the south remains, temperatures between -12 and -19 this morning. For Winnipeg, we're looking at -19 at the airport, -13 at the Fox, a big gap there. So wherever you are in between, you might notice that shift. But currently in the city, we're looking at -13 at at the Forks. A few clouds right now, expecting more clouds to roll in this morning. We do warm up to a high of -6 later. As Marcy mentioned, you will definitely notice that brisk morning wind. The wind chill feels like -24 this morning before we see some clear afternoon. But later tonight, temperature will be dipping to about -15. For the Pembina Valley region, more than wind cloud to the more is tracking it towards Headingley. We're seeing temperatures around -9 at this time, also warming close to -4 later today. In the Westman region, Brandon and nearby, we're seeing cloudy conditions there, -11 at this time. A few flurries spotted. You warm up to -4. Dauphin all the way towards the Roblin area. We're looking at light snow falling in some area. You are currently at -13. You warm up to -5 under cloudy conditions. In the Interlake region, Gimli and nearby, -17. A few clouds, highs of -8 today. Now we go into the northern half of the province. The powerful influence surrounding communities, we're looking at -24 to -26. We're going to see sunny conditions there. You get to -7 later, though. The wind chill this morning, you will feel it. It feels like -30. For Thompson and nearby towards Split Lake, clear conditions at this time, but it is a frigid morning. We're seeing temperatures around -33 at this time. You warm up to -12 later in the day, but the wind chill is pegged around -36, -37. In the Gillam area, we're cleared there this morning, -33 at this time. You warm up to -18. The wind chill also feels close to -40 there. In the Lynn Lake area, actual wind chill in the Lynn Lake area, -40 at this time. Temperatures around -35. You warm up to -12, but we won't really feel that hit much due to the wind chill. While for Tudula Lake, we were seeing actual temperatures around -33, warming up to -20, but the life-threatening wind chill close to -46. And further north in the Churchill and York region, we have ice crystals there at -34. You struggle to get to a high of -25, but the wind chill in that region, -45, Marcy. So it's still cold. While we're seeing a mix of sun and clouds in the south, it's dangerously cold in the northern parts of the province.
He's like, what are they doing? Do you know what we're doing, me and Corey, with those sounds?
Yeah, like nope.
No, we're doing actually. So I don't know if anyone can hear this but us. It's just in our headphones. Okay, let's be quiet. Ready?
Oh, but it's my server here just trying to respond.
It kind of sounds like a sad baby dinosaur.
It does,
that's hanging
that
out in the
server.
studio. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like some old computer box that's going,
Yeah.
And every time Abby says it's going to be -37,
It reacts. Yeah, it's like, computers don't like cold environments. You know, they don't like it too cold.
Right? Even the tech says no thank you to that forecast. Okay, let's get into what's happening with the morning commute. That's why Corey is here.
Yeah, and so far the morning commute isn't too bad so far. Sidewalks are nice and grippy on the run in this morning, but highways not too bad either. The worst highway it looks like right now is around Lynn Lake, the 391. Covered with poor visibility according to Manitoba 511. So look out if you're hitting the highways around Lynn Lake this morning. Other than that, though, if you do see something going on, it's actually been pretty quiet on the commuter line so far, but we are approaching pothole season. I've seen a few already going around town. So if you want to if you spot a new one, you can give me a call at folks know about it. That number, 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Chrisley Ramlakan is here now with business news and stories this morning. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
So the price of oil, we're all watching, it remains elevated with the war in the Middle East. There have been talks about increasing supply to ease prices. So what's the latest there?
So G7 energy ministers met yesterday, but they stopped short of agreeing on a release of strategic oil reserves. Instead, they asked the International Energy Agency to assess the situation, and the IEA says its member countries are going to assess supply and market conditions to inform a decision on whether to make emergency stocks available. So the conflict has disrupted a key oil export corridor and has left a fifth of global supplies in a chokehold. Now, Energy Minister Tim Hodgson says the federal government has asked Canadian oil producers to assess how much crude they could potentially release into the market. He says Canada is blessed with abundant oil and gas reserves and stands in a position of strength. So Canada is an IEA member, but as one of the world's top producers and a net exporter, it is not obligated obligated to keep strategic stockpiles. Refiners and marketers keep buffer supplies in case of emergencies. And meanwhile, European governments are on edge about the prospect of a repeat of the energy crisis they faced in 2022 after Russia invaded Ukraine.
Staying on the topic of energy, the price of fuel is driving up airline tickets now.
Yes, that's right. Some airlines in Asia, Europe, Australia, and New Zealand have either raised fares, added fuel surcharges, or adjusted schedules as the conflict also disrupts key air routes. So Air Canada and WestJet have not increased prices yet, but they say they are monitoring the situation closely. And that's all because fuel makes up about 30% of a typical airline's operating expenses. For more on this, here's John Graddick, who teaches aviation management at McGill University.
Like right now, the pricing that we've had is based on $65 a barrel, which is what has been, the average price of oil over the last few months, except for the last 2 weeks. So when the price of oil shot up to $90 or $120 earlier this week, that was a significant impact on the spot price of aviation fuel globally.
However, several Asian and European airlines are holding in place after securing part of their fuel needs at fixed prices. And despite higher prices, analysts see demand remaining strong. Passenger traffic continues to outpace growth in airline seat capacity, and some carriers are forecasting record demand for spring break. And rising fuel costs are also expected to push airlines to slow their growth plans, effectively allowing companies to, in exchange, raise their prices in the meantime. And in addition to high fuel costs, tightening airspace threatens to disrupt the global travel industry further as pilots reroute around the Middle East conflict.
And finally, this morning on your business news, Meta now has another social network in its portfolio.
Yes, that's right. The owner of Facebook and Instagram just bought Moltbook, a social network for AI bots, where AI agents interact with one another autonomously. So as artificial intelligence expands into more aspects of our lives, tech companies are really trying to figure out the best way to position themselves. So Moltbook became the talk of Silicon Valley last month, racking up millions of registered bots within days of its launch. Now, some in the industry saw it as a major leap because it demonstrated what can happen when AI agents socialize with one another like humans. But others said it was full of sham agents, AI slop, and security risks. So Meta's acquisition comes weeks after rival OpenAI hired the founder of the technology behind Moltbook. And Meta says Moltbook's approach opens up new ways for AI agents to work for people and businesses. But, big tech is facing pressure to prove all of its investments in AI will actually make money. But, could you even imagine that AI agent that answers when you call your insurance company talking to the AI agent that answers when you call your credit card company, and then they're also talking to Chat GPT? I can't imagine what's going on in there.
And they're also talking to each other, on their own social platforms. It's a lot to absorb, to say the least. All right, Crystalie, thank you for talking to us.
Thanks, Marcy.
Crystalie Ramlicam with our business news on CBC. You're on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. Wednesday morning, March 11th, let's take a ride in the Moonflower Express. Isn't that a good name? That is the debut solo album, the name of the debut solo album from a Winnipeg singer-songwriter, Chris Rendina. Kind of describes their music as traditional rock and folk, a little bit of electronica in there, backed by his band, The Woke Mob. Here's Chris Rendina. And Billionaires.
Oh, the taste of the ocean on my tongue. Oh, the breath of freedom in my lungs. The feel of such fine, fine silk between my fingertips, where the fat of the land boils under the sun. Oh, to be king for a day, for the whole world to be caught up in my sway. I must be number one of all God's children, with regrets to all who drown in my way. Now let's get this straight, 'cause you say it don't matter either way, and these animals in your zoo are very well fed. So then let us begin, that we might see how it ends, and together we'll watch the fog come rolling in. Oh, to be a lowly billionaire, I'd round up all my enemies in that square, and then one by one I'd watch them all fall down, until the rot of it is all around. Now who's gonna say what they say when I'm not around? Who's gonna wear the burden of a crown? Who's gonna sing sweet hymns for all those birds and bees? Who's gonna take their place on the higher ground? I felt so ashamed, yeah, I hung my head in disgrace. Oh, I'll do anything just to feel like my old self again. So then let us begin, that we might see how it ends, and these animals in your zoo take what they get. But oh, to be a lowly billionaire, I'd round up all my enemies in the square, and then one by one I'd watch them all fall down, until the
Billionaires, that's Chris Rendina out of Winnipeg. If you want to check out his album, it's a solo album called The Moonflower Express. 6:51 a.m. So it is 9 minutes ahead of 7 o'clock this morning. Thanks for joining us on CBC. Next on the show, it is a common refrain these days that mental health matters, and new evidence suggests that the youngest members of Canada's workforce are taking that message to heart. According to insurance data, Gen Z Canadians are increasingly looking to psychologists to help manage mental health concerns. And Gen Z men in particular are proving more willing than ever to talk to a professional. Janine Hubbard is one of those professionals. She's a registered psychologist in St. John's. Good morning.
Good morning.
You noticing this trend?
Oh, absolutely. And it's an encouraging and positive one. I think, we've spent so long trying to decrease the stigma and encourage these discussions, which has been great. And I think we've also seen things like inclusion of social emotional curriculum in the schools, and just increased awareness and knowledge, so that we do see people reaching out for help at much higher rates than I think we've seen in the past, particularly in young people.
Is it all positive, or are there any downsides to this?
Well, it's a couple of issues. One, it's certainly flooding the public sector in terms of trying to get help, so that wait lists for that age group are getting longer and longer, and real challenges meeting those needs. This particular study came from insurance, so these are people who presumably had some type of coverage in order to be able to see psychologists and also fill prescriptions. So it's, I think, really important people are reaching out. What we have seen is there's lots more discussion. This is a generation that's very open about everything. Unfortunately, it also means that they have been exposed to a lot of misinformation. While your favorite TikTok influencer or favorite celebrity may be out there speaking about their mental health experiences, and that's great if that encourages you to pick up the phone or to book an appointment, the information isn't always accurate. And so sometimes we're doing a lot of, okay, I know that, it sounds like you have some of those same symptoms, but let's explain why maybe that isn't a clinical diagnosis, which is okay. And in fact, that can be really positive. But then let's reframe it in, here are some things we could do to help with some of those struggles, because you are still reporting struggles, whether or not it's an official diagnosis. And some of it may just be like a lot of our young people missed out on typical developmental stages, like, navigating the high school cafeteria, early post-secondary years that were virtual. There's so much of that. So they are struggling in different ways.
It's an interesting thing you bring up, though, that that the help is the help is needed. More people coming forward, but it's not always. It's not always. Sometimes it is, but it's not always something that is diagnosable. Is it those shorthand little TikTok videos that say that talk about ADD, ADHD, anxiety disorders that make people sort of maybe label things, which doesn't mean they're not struggling with some type of anxiety and need that help, perhaps, but maybe they don't have the disorder. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. So, I refer to little a and big A anxiety. Every human being has little a anxiety. Big A anxiety is at a clinical level that perhaps does need medication, perhaps does need some more intensive targeted therapy. But that doesn't mean, especially for this generation that kind of lost out on some opportunities, that they don't maybe need a little bit of extra help with, okay, how do I cope with university exams? Because we didn't have exams in high school because they were all canceled. So you don't have to have a clinical diagnosis to seek help.
I think
in the same way, there's lots of people with clinical diagnoses who are like, I'm fine.
Yeah, I think it's important to talk about that aspect of this only because then it'll inform what we need in the system to properly help people as well, right? When you're talking about the shortage of professionals to keep up with this. I want to ask about something, to go back to something that is interesting here. How receptive is important, rather, how significant is it that Gen Z men are turning more to professional help?
This is huge because this is a group, men in general have often been underrepresented in terms of mental health services, partly because we know their symptoms often present differently. Women are more inclined to internalize, whereas men may externalize, so it may come out more in physical health symptoms. So some of that education around, again, if you're seeing this, actually, this is what it might be, is encouraging. But I think we're also starting to get really creative and come up with different ways that men are more likely to respond to. So activity-based groups, things that are more, we're going to, build a canoe together. Or project I thought was fantastic was a hospital-based barber shop that had either peer counselors or a social worker just kind of hanging out, because especially in certain cultures, that's where men congregate and they talk. And if you can start to introduce, some mental health, mental wellness discussions into that kind of far more naturalistic setting, it's getting a much greater response. So I'm really excited to see. I don't know how these particular men kind of wound up seeking services, but I'm really excited to see what we can learn and how we can continue to develop some of those services.
All right, Janine, thank you very much for walking us through some of the data and your thoughts on it. Appreciate it.
No, anytime. Thanks so much.
That is Janine Hubbard, a registered psychologist. Lots to learn out of that data. We'll have to have some follow-ups for what we understand about it in Manitoba and its impact. It is 3 minutes now to 7 o'clock. Still ahead of the program this morning, a disability rights advocate says that protecting vulnerable people considering medical assistance in dying should be more of a focus for governments.
That is a central question then, in terms of safeguards. Are people receiving the social supports, the emotional supports that are very important, especially at times of vulnerability.
We're going to hear about a report that he wrote on medical assistance in dying. We're talking about MAID because yesterday we had a story on that highlighted the fact that in Manitoba, in fact, people are denied medical assistance in dying at 5 times the rate of the national average. So how does all of this fit together when we're looking at it? Also, in the next hour of Information Radio, speaking of yesterday, we had Manitoba MP Ben Carr on the show. He was talking about Bill C9, which is working its way through Ottawa to combat hate in Canada. Now, this says he was on talking in the wake of what happened at the Toronto synagogue shootings. But today we're going to talk to a Winnipeg lawyer who wants to see more prevention over detention when it comes to hate crimes. So his take on C9. Right now, Heather Wells is in with headlines.
Good morning. Well, CBC News has learned of 2 fatal adverse reactions at private plasma clinics in Winnipeg. Experts say giving plasma is usually safe, and 2 deaths in under 4 months is unprecedented. Health Canada and the clinics say they have not found links between giving plasma and the deaths. Several dozen demonstrators rallied in downtown Winnipeg last evening in a show of support for Israel, the United States, and the Iranian people. We will take you to that rally in our next local news coming up at 7:30.
Thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
It is -13 in Winnipeg. It's clear. Today's high is -6. If you have a problem out there on the commute, please let us know. 788-30-93. You can reach Corey. He's been looking at the highways up around Lynn Lake. Highways could be partly snow-covered, or they are partly snow-covered and some poor visibility. So if you are up in that part of Manitoba, you already know you want to take care. Stay tuned. Coming up on CBC's 89.3 FM on Information Radio World Report. So the latest in national and international news, and of course on the war in the Middle East. Stay with us.
On the Current.
And I also believe myself to be someone who is publicly sober because of my memoir.
13 years ago, Jovita Bydlowska wrote a memoir called Drunk Mom about her addiction to alcohol and path to sobriety. Now she's talking about how that road has been anything but straight and about the shame she felt along the way.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Idil Musa. Iran's capital is being hit hard by U.S. and Israeli strikes. People walk through a wreckage-strewn street in Tehran. Israel's military says it has hit key command centers belonging to Iran's armed forces. Iran is firing back with strikes against Israel, as well as several Gulf states. This as the country faces its own internal political crisis and growing anti-government sentiment. The CBC's David Common joins me now from Amman, Jordan. David, what is the latest?
Let's start with the message to Iranians themselves. The police chief in the country saying protesters will be dealt with the same way as the enemy. In other words, they will use lethal force should anybody try to rise up against this regime. Militarily, Iran saying it has launched what it calls its 35th wave of operations. They have targeted Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain, primarily with missiles. Often, Iran says, targeting American military installations, but we have seen multiple incidents over the past nearly 2 weeks at this point of them targeting civil infrastructure as well in those Gulf states.
Israel has its focus split on 2 fronts given the ongoing conflict with Hezbollah in Lebanon. What can you tell us about that?
And it is very important to note that this is a conflict that does not directly involve the Americans. It has long been a conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. This is in some ways just the latest chapter. But when we have seen previous chapters, they have tended to target Hezbollah strongholds in South Beirut, a densely populated city, but it became somewhat predictable. In the last 24 hours, Israel has been targeting central Beirut, and that has thrown a number of Lebanese people into waves of fear because they don't know where is safe anymore. Families who have been displaced by airstrikes have been taking shelter in schools, stadiums, and other public buildings. Some 700,000 people in that country have been told to flee.
The CBC's David Common in Amman, Jordan. Thank you.
Thank you.
At least 3 commercial ships in the Persian Gulf have been attacked. British authorities say the crews were rescued after their vessels were hit by projectiles, but it's not clear where they were fired from. The attacks are the latest disruption to one of the world's most critical energy routes. Megan Williams has more from Dubai.
The attacks this morning in and around the Strait of Hormuz represent a sharp new escalation around the Gulf's main shipping lane. British maritime authorities say the ships were hit by unknown projectiles and set at least one vessel on fire and forced crews to abandon ship. Also this morning, the U.S. military says it has struck 16 Iranian mine-laying vessels. Oil markets are already reacting, with prices rising as tanker traffic through the Gulf stalls. U.S. President Donald Trump has urged tanker crews to keep sailing, saying they should, quote, show some guts. Meanwhile, the conflict is hitting energy infrastructure throughout the Gulf. Abu Dhabi's national oil company has shut the Ruwais refinery after a drone strike sparked a fire at the complex on Tuesday. Here in Dubai, 2 drones fell in the vicinity of the Dubai International Airport this morning, with 4 foreign nationals injured. Qatar says it intercepted a missile, Kuwait stopped drones, and a woman was killed in Bahrain in a residential strike yesterday. Gulf states say they don't want to be dragged into the war, but are increasingly finding themselves in the line of fire. Megan Williams, CBC News, Dubai.
Turning to national news now, the Carney government is 1 seat closer to securing a majority in the House of Commons. A 4th MP has crossed the floor to join the Liberal caucus. But unlike the others, this one is from the NDP. David Thurton has the details.
It's great to be here. Not very often that I'm so happy to be in a church.
As recently as last Thursday, Lori Idlot was on stage in Ottawa at an NDP leadership campaign event. Although there were rumors Idlot was considering joining the governing party, she gave no hint that she was about to cross the floor and join the Liberal caucus.
I was very nervous, I'll be honest, to speak up, because I think that whatever words we do share as MPs has so much influence. And I truly am nervous about my influence. I am.
In a statement, the party's interim leader, Don Davies, announced the Nunavut MP's departure. Davies said he was very disappointed in Idlot. 2 senior Liberals also confirmed the move to CBC News. Idlot is the 4th member of Parliament to cross the aisle. The last 3 have been Conservatives. This latest move brings the Liberals closer to a majority, and it makes the upcoming by-elections in Toronto and a Montreal suburb all the more important. New Democrats who are in the process of choosing their new leader are worse off, especially after last year's federal election decimated the party's seat count in the House. They are now down to 6 MPs. David Thornton, CBC News, Ottawa.
A major ice storm is forecast to hit southern parts of Ontario and Quebec. As much as 30 millimeters of freezing rain could fall over the next 24 hours, and it could affect Ottawa through to Montreal and up to Quebec City. Cendrix Bouchard with Hydro-Quebec says crews are on standby.
Also making sure that we have all the equipment required. We're thinking about, electric lines, transformers, poles as well.
Many school boards in eastern Ontario and parts of Quebec have already canceled classes. CBC has learned 2 people died after giving plasma at for-profit clinics. Health Canada says they had fatal adverse reactions. As the CBC's Michelle Allen in Winnipeg reports, friends of a young international student who died are calling for accountability.
Friends of 22-year-old Rodiat Alabetti say they don't understand why she collapsed at a plasma clinic.
Myself, my friends, my family, her family, we're all in the dark.
Mary Ann Chica says Alabetti died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. A CBC News investigation found 2 people died in under 4 months after selling their plasma at the for-profit clinics. Health Canada said it received reports of 2 fatal adverse reactions at 2 different Grifols locations in Winnipeg. Grifols is a Spanish company with multiple for-profits in Canada. It pays people around $30 to $100 for plasma. Health Canada says it's still assessing the reports. It hasn't found a link between plasma donation and the 2 people who died. In a statement, Griffiths said it had no reason to believe there's a correlation between the donor's deaths and plasma donation. Hematologist Dr. Ryan Zarychansky says plasma donation is usually incredibly safe.
The odds of someone, or the probability of someone getting very seriously harmed by donating plasma is like getting struck by lightning. Like, it's that uncommon.
He says 2 deaths in under 4 months raises questions.
It would give us a lot of closure to know what actually happened.
Chica says Alibetti's loved ones and the public deserve answers. Michelle Allen, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Nova Scotia RCMP have conducted a second round of polygraph examinations in the mysterious disappearance of Jack and Lily Sullivan. The children were reported missing from their rural home last May. A massive search was conducted, but they were never found. Allie Thompson brings us the latest on this new phase of the investigation.
It was in an odd spot.
Haley Ferdinand says she became emotional when she came upon a piece of her missing niece's pink blanket, tattered and intertwined in a tree near the home where the children lived in Nova Scotia's Pictou County. It's one of the only pieces of physical evidence in the mysterious disappearance of Jack and Lily Sullivan. Ferdinand discovered it on May 2nd, 2025, the first day of the search for the siblings. Since then, family members on all sides have suggested it was planted. Ferdinand says she was asked about that in a polygraph last month.
It was, did you plant the blanket in the tree? Did you place the blanket in the tree? Did you put the blanket in the tree? And did you leave the blanket in the tree?
Ferdinand says she answered no to each question, and she was told she passed. Michelle Janice, a criminal justice professor at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette, says police use polygraphs to help shape interviews and narrow down suspect pools. But conducting a second round of polygraphs suggests something else.
So what it seems like to me from the outside is that they've exhausted all of their immediate leads.
RCMP declined an interview request, but say the blanket is with its forensic testing lab. For Ferdinand, her polygraph was simply another box to tick.
You know, we just want answers and we want Lily and Jack home.
Allie Thompson, CBC News, Halifax.
That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Ethel Musa. This is CBC News.
Good morning, everyone. Wednesday, minus 13 in Winnipeg. Thanks for joining us on Information Radio. This is CBC Live from downtown Winnipeg on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This hour on the program, we're going to continue a few conversations and get more context and different perspectives on some stories we had on yesterday's show. If you were with us, you heard that Manitoba denies aid to people, medical assistance in dying, at 5 times more than what is happening nationally when you compare those averages. This hour on the show, though, we're going to hear from a disability rights advocate who says protecting vulnerable people considering medical assistance in dying should be more of a focus for governments. Also this hour on the program, we're going to talk about Bill C-9. It continues to be raised across this country. Ottawa is looking at that. It's often called the anti-hate bill. We're going to talk to a lawyer who wants to see, though, prevention over detention and sees some challenges with Bill C-9. Ben Carr yesterday, MP, was talking about it as it works its way through Ottawa. Also, I just want to mention this before we go to headlines. It's also come up when we did the coverage of the anti-protest laws, the bylaw that came up at City Hall in Winnipeg. Remember, that was shelved, and councillors and City Councillor Evan Duncan and the Mayor of the City of Winnipeg both said it was shelved for now, though they still believe some protection is needed around places of worship and such for people who are protesting, that some protection is needed, that there would be a bigger buffer zone where you couldn't be. But they said part of the reason that they were putting it on hold was because they were also waiting to see what was happening with Bill C-9 at the federal level. So we're going to dig into that bill a little bit more this half hour. Let's go to Heather Welsh. She has lots of news that's developing today. Heather, where are we starting?
Well, 2 people are dead after donating plasma at private clinics in Winnipeg. Health Canada says it received reports of 2 fatal adverse reactions at Grifols in Winnipeg in under 4 months. A hematologist, Dr. Ryan Zarachansky, says serious complications from giving plasma are incredibly rare, which is why these deaths should be reviewed. We're going to hear from the I-Team coming up. And the NDP majority in the Manitoba legislature is 1 seat larger today. Dawson Trail MLA Bob Lagasse is leaving the PCs to sit as an independent. Lagasse says he has butted heads with opposition leader Abi Khan, although he did not explain further. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
It is time for the regional forecast. Time for the forecast now, the short version. Abby's going to tell us how cold it is.
Yes, Marcy, we're looking at some sunshine in the south while the extreme cold still holds the far northern part of the province. Hence, that yellow warning still in effect for regions around Brochet and tracking it all the way towards Tudela Lake this morning, where extreme wind chills and the values of -45 to -50 this morning, which means frostbite in minutes. But for the south, we'll see that brisk start and highs near -6. Winnipeg and the Red River Valley region at this time, we're looking at temperatures hover around -13 at the Forks and -19 at the airport. Clear skies. Morning temperatures hovered near -15. Expect some clouds to roll in sometime this morning, and we'll see a high near -6. Though the wind chill this morning, if you're making the transition from one bus to another, is going to be feeling like -24. So be prepared for that.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Corey Funkson with a look at our commute.
Yeah, so far, quiet commute here in the city. Haven't heard of any major issues. Worst highways right now, though, seem to be around Lynn Lake and the Paw, both showing covered conditions and poor visibility, according to Manitoba 511. So other than that, though, if you do see something else going on, you can give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number, 204-788-3093.
Kind of an inky blue sky over Winnipeg on that overhead shot if you're watching the show stream on YouTube. Well, let's get into this discussion about Bill C-9 and how Canada tackles hate. As I was mentioning, we spoke to Member of Parliament for Winnipeg South Centre, Ben Carr, yesterday on the program after 3 synagogues in the Toronto area were shot at last week. Now, no one was hurt, but it has sparked conversation about how to prevent these types of cases. Carr happened to be in Toronto at the time of the shooting.
We need to rally around each other as a broader community. So that's one aspect of it. The other important piece comes in at my level of government, working alongside the provincial government and the municipal government as well. And that is to ensure that there are security infrastructure resources in place, and we have to look at legislative changes. In fact, today I'll be giving a speech in the House of Commons in a few hours from now in relation to a federal bill being proposed that will see tougher sentences and tougher laws for people who attack minority communities on the basis of their religious faith.
So that was MP for Winnipeg South Centre Ben Carr on our show yesterday speaking about the legislation, Bill C-9, he hopes will deter hate-related incidents. He mentioned working at the municipal level. So the anti-protest law, that's what people here locally have been calling it, that was attempting to make its way as a bylaw through the city of Winnipeg, would have created a 100-meter buffer zone around a range of sites, including schools, hospitals, and cultural centres. Within those zones, so-called quote, nuisance protests would have been prohibited. That was put on hold. And City Councillor Evan Duncan said the city is going to wait and see what comes of the federal legislation, Bill C-9. So this morning, we're taking a closer look at someone who has her own thoughts on Bill C-9. Kyla Lee is a lawyer in Vancouver, and she has a different perspective than Ben Carr does, certainly. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. So what are your thoughts on what Ben Carr said in terms of how much of an impact, this amendment could have on deterring hate-related incidents?
I don't think that the amendment is going to have any significant impact on deterring hate-related incidents. We already have a very robust system in our criminal code for addressing things that are harmful to minority religious groups, mischief laws. We have laws about hate speech and hate crimes already, and none of those have served to deter people. Making the law tougher isn't going to change people's hateful thoughts and get them to act differently. It's only going to punish them more when they do.
So can we walk through some of the details of Bill C9? Obviously, it's complex, but really, there's sort of four new criminal offenses, right? That it's proposing. Tell me a little bit about your concerns around them.
Yes. So the four new criminal offenses are a standalone hate crime offense. One, right now in the criminal code, we have a hate crime designation that can be applied to an offense, but it's not a standalone offense itself. This is a concern because essentially what happens is people, instead of being charged with one crime that's motivated by hate, they're being charged with one crime plus a crime for being motivated by hate when committing the other crime, which is just complicated. It just basically gives a person two convictions and, a greater sentence, which they're already getting for hate crimes for the same incident. It doesn't do much to deter things. There's an offense for intimidation of anybody who's accessing religious places, community buildings, daycare centers, schools, senior centers, and also a crime for obstructing or interfering with people's access, which again is already a crime in the criminal code under our existing mischief provisions. So none of these are really changes that actually do anything significantly to change the law. They just make it more specific.
What's interesting in this, I understand, is that when they're looking at these four areas that they're proposing to amend, the bill itself doesn't have a definition of what a state of fear is. Why is that significant?
State of fear is a term that's used sometimes in our criminal law. There's, fear that applies in uttering threats offenses, fear that applies in peace bonds or restraining orders, as sometimes they're called. And there's definitions that come from the case law. There's no definition in this bill, and the existing definition of state of fear coming from the case law is quite broad. The bar is very low for somebody feeling fear, and to convict somebody of one of the more serious offenses in the criminal code, a hate-related offense, with a very low bar for somebody's perception that a person might feel fear, exposes people to a real risk of wrongful conviction. In fact, the bill itself doesn't even require that somebody feel fear. It just requires that there's an intent to cause somebody to feel fear.
So how could that, one could see how that might complicate things then if someone's protesting outside of a place of worship. Because that would be different from obviously someone shooting at a place of worship, and yet you're saying that if we don't under the law define these things the same way, both of those people, someone who is shooting and somebody who is protesting, both could be convicted of the same crime, a serious offense, because you could prove that they're causing fear. Is that right?
Yes, you could have somebody who's even just protesting legitimately, people who are pro-Palestinian protesters outside a Jewish place of faith, for example. There is a perception by a lot of people that might cause somebody to feel fear. There's probably not an intention on the pro-Palestinian protesters' part, most of them, to cause anybody to feel fear. Yeah, so you have these complicated situations, and the police are the ones who have to make the decision about who gets charged and whether somebody gets charged, and they're not legally trained. So you have people going before the courts that may have never intended to do anything wrong and then having to defend themselves from criminal charges.
Having said that, obviously we're in a moment where a lot of people are saying, we have to do something, that the nature of hate in this country and these incidents of like the shooting at the three synagogues. Here we had three different incidents in Winnipeg at a mosque, a synagogue. We had graffiti and hateful comments strewn on the sides of buildings and such. What do you think would help prevent these hate-related incidents if C9, in your view, is not the way to go?
No, I don't think the long arm of the criminal law is the way to change people's hearts and minds. And that's what's at issue here. It's people's deeply held beliefs that are hateful in nature. And so what needs to be done is the government needs to invest the time and resources into mechanisms that are going to change how people feel. If we stop the problem before it turns into a criminal act, that's much better for society. Investing in counseling programs, education, public messaging, types of things that are going to change people's beliefs, as opposed to just punishing them for having them, is more likely to prevent these incidents in the future.
Hate crime cases can be difficult because of the need to prove intent. We've somewhat alluded to that and talked about it in this conversation already. Will anything about the amendments, about C9 make this easier? Like, could they look, you're analyzing this as it's proposed, but could they strengthen this where you would see some value to take a hate crime to court?
They certainly could strengthen it by providing more definitions of like what constitutes, causing a state of fear. They could provide more definitions of what actually constitutes hate speech. Right now, there's not an active definition in the bill. If they were to provide specific definitions of that, it would be easier to identify the intent. But because it's this more nebulous concept within the bill, you have, it being completely open to subjective interpretation by whoever's doing the enforcement, and then subjective interpretation by prosecutors and judges or juries.
Thank you for your time, Kyla Lee. We appreciate you weighing in.
Thank you for having me.
If you want to weigh in on Bill C9, 788-3205. Kyla Lee with us, a lawyer in Vancouver with our ongoing coverage. It is 7:23 a.m. Morning Sports in a moment, and this tune's appropriately named. This is Super Bowl Sunday from Winnipeg-based indie group Mise en Scène.
I met up with a friend who later got called in to cook. I started talking to strangers. It turns out we like to hate the same books. I think I knew you had it in you to take me down, to make me feel as bad as you do. First and 10 for Kansas City. Touchdown on red jerseys. I don't know who won the game, but I know your face and I know your name. So when I walk outside my door and see you driving by, remember I survived you. I met up with your main girl on Monday. She used to be my friend. We started crying, told me she's sorry, and never saw her again. I didn't know she had it in her. Now you're a father, give her a daughter, born in November. On the field for the 49ers, Hail Mary pace, and the scream's getting higher. I don't know who won the game, but I know your face and I know your name. So when I walk outside my door and see you driving by, remember I survived you.
Poppy, huh? That's Mise en Scène. Super Bowl Sunday. A little sneak peek of their sound on their new album. It's called Drive-Through Confessional, and their release show coming up is at Times Changed on April 18th. If you've never been there to see a show, go there to see a show. It's a really great spot. Have you ever been there to see a show, Scott, when you come through Winnipeg, maybe?
Not thus far, but
Yeah.
certainly open to the idea.
It's just like that classic dusty floor, everything stapled to the
Yeah.
wall, full packed in, stage at the
Yeah,
front. And when
proper.
it's proper. When it's popping, it's proper. All right, let's talk about the sports scene. Not to be for the Jets last night.
No, unfortunately. I mean, they got off to a decent start with Morgan Barron scoring the opening goal against Anaheim, but the Ducks got the tying goal and then went on to win it 4-1. A disappointing night for a team that had won a few in a row previous to this game and was trying to chase down a playoff spot and still is. But the chances of making the postseason are diminishing, to be sure, which explains why the crowd at the Canada Life Centre last night was shouting at the players to shoot the puck. Barron was asked about the jeering.
Obviously, it's not a good feeling. Yeah, you can hear the frustration. I think they have the right to be frustrated in a game like that, right? Like, we need all these points right now, and especially against a team like that. That's good chance they're going to be in the playoffs, but we're hunting all these teams in front of us down. So, we're sharing that with them. We know we have to be better, and that's all right.
And if you're wondering about the exact odds, they are now less than 10% to make the playoffs. Currently, though, the Jets hold the 6th best shot of winning the first overall draft pick. I still like to see them make the playoffs.
Yeah.
Winnipeg back in action tomorrow hosting the New York Rangers.
All right, let's move on. Troubling news on the soccer pitch.
This is a devastating sight. Alphonso Davies clearly in pain. You've got to feel for him. He's had such bad luck with injuries, and it looks like he's just picked up another one.
Yeah, the last thing, Marcy, Canadian footy fans wanted to see, Alphonso Davies getting hurt while playing for Bayern Munich yesterday. Though the club hasn't released specifics beyond calling it a muscle problem, it did not look good. It was a non-contact injury suffered while Davies was playing the ball. He seemed in distress immediately, covering his face and waving his arms in a gesture of frustration. And that frustration, Marcy, is understandable. Davies only recently returned from a torn hamstring, and before that missed 9 months with a knee injury. When he's on his game, Davies, as many listeners will know, is one of the fastest, most skilled players on earth. He showed that yesterday. In less than half an hour on the pitch, he set up 2 Bayern goals. And now we're left to wonder whether he'll be on the pitch for the World Cup, where he was expected to be the key to Canada's fortunes, that World Cup starting in 92 days.
While we're talking numbers, wow, man. Let's go to the NBA and talk about the record that was set yesterday.
Bonkers. Bam Adebayo with 83 points in Miami's win over Washington. Only Wilt Chamberlain has scored more. That mythical 100-point night that came while John F. Kennedy was in office. But neither of them were who Adebayo was focusing on after this game. Instead, it was on his hero, the late Kobe Bryant, who once scored 81 against the Raptors and who Adebayo has now surpassed.
To be 83 and you pass him, in my mind, it's like, what would he say to me? Because I've always wanted to have a conversation with him, but just a surreal moment being in the company with somebody you idolized growing up. I really got emotional. It's Wilt, me, then Kobe, which sounds crazy.
Especially crazy since Adebayo, Marcy, is considered a defense-first player. And there he was getting double, tripled, and eventually quadruple teamed by the Wizards, who still could not stop him. It was just one of those special nights, and made even more special by the presence of his longtime girlfriend, Asia Wilson. During post-game interviews, Marcy, Adebayo called Wilson, who's considered by many the greatest women's player in the world, his biggest inspiration and support behind the scenes. Nice moment there.
Rare talents, man. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Scott.
You betcha.
Scott Regehr with Morning Sports here on CBC. Take it easy if you're up around Lynn Lake. Highways partly covered with poor visibility due to what, obviously, the snow and the conditions up there. We'll have your regional forecast following your news. Also, we have the medical column following the news. You can hear that every Wednesday morning at 7:40 with Dr. Raj Bardwaj. Today, he's going to talk about why some people's physical and mental abilities improve with aging, improve after the age of 65. So there's a new study out that looked at that, and we'll find out more about it after your CBC News from Manitoba.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is minus 13. Another cool Wednesday in Winnipeg, a high of -6. CBC News has learned 2 fatal adverse reactions at a private plasma clinic in Winnipeg. Experts say giving plasma is usually safe, and 2 deaths in under 4 months is unprecedented. CBC I-Team's Michelle Allen has the story.
A CBC News investigation found 2 people died in under 4 months after selling their plasma at Grifols in Winnipeg. Health Canada said it received reports of 2 fatal adverse reactions. Friends of 22-year-old Rodiat Alabetti say her heart stopped at the clinic that pays for plasma. She died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital.
It would give us a lot of closure to know what actually happened.
Mary Ann Chica is one of Alabetti's friends. Health Canada says it's still assessing the reports. It hasn't found a link between plasma donation and the death. In a statement, Grifols said it had no reason to believe that there's a correlation between the donor's passing and plasma donation. Hematologist Dr. Ryan Zarychansky says plasma donation is usually incredibly safe.
The odds of someone, or the probability of someone getting very seriously harmed by donating plasma is like getting struck by lightning. Like it's that uncommon.
He says 2 deaths in under 4 months raises questions. Michelle Allen, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The mother of a woman who went missing in western Manitoba a decade ago hopes the RCMP's drive for fresh information will bring her closure. Lorleen Bone was reported missing 10 years ago this week. The 31-year-old last spoke with her mother 10 days before. RCMP are asking for tips to solve her disappearance. Evelyn Chartrand is Bone's mother.
Let her come home. Let my have my closure. Please help me out there, somebody. I really need this closure. I really need to put my daughter to lay to rest.
Chartrand says she holds a memorial walk every year, and her family is planning a search this summer. Several dozen demonstrators rallied in downtown Winnipeg last night in a show of support for Israel, the United States, and the Iranian people. People with ties to local Iranian and Jewish groups chanted, hugged, and shook hands. They issued a joint statement saying they stand together with the people of Iran in their fight for freedom. Mona Saidi left Iran in 2020 and still has family there.
We just support our people in Iran, and we be their voice in here. We don't have any contact with our family in Iran. And right now, in the middle of the help from US and Israel, we came to the rally to be their voice for our people.
Saidi says her family members are safe even with American and Israeli attacks. She says she worries more about the dangers of the Iranian regime. You can hear the latest on the situation in the Middle East as well as other national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. The PC caucus in the Manitoba legislature is 1 seat short today. Dawson Trail MLA Bob Lagasse is leaving the Progressive Conservative caucus to sit as an independent. Lisa Dick was the president of the PC's Dawson Trail Constituency Association. She says it takes a lot of strength for Lagasse to go it alone and focus solely on the needs of his constituency.
I have respect for anybody that's going to take a move like that and be independent. I have respect for people that want to put their name forward and run publicly. It takes a lot of courage to do that, especially in today's climate. It can be very volatile and negative.
Lagasse says he has butted heads with opposition leader Abi Khan. He did not explain further. The man seen in a video getting beaten up by a security guard last month at the downtown Dollarama faces additional charges. Police say a different guard at the Radisson Hotel was threatened with a knife this past Monday. A source says the 46-year-old suspect is the same man from the Dollarama incident. He was released from custody after being arrested on charges of robbery and uttering threats. He now faces new charges of possessing a weapon and failing to comply with a probation order. He was released from custody again. A new investigation by animal rights advocates shows horses being flown for slaughter in Japan continue to suffer injuries, illness, even death. Caitlin Mitchell at Animal Justice says they obtained documents from the Japanese government and Canadian Food Inspection Agency. They found nearly 250 cases of injury and illness and at least 9 deaths in 18 shipments of horses between 2024 and 2023.
The records are clear that they're transport related. Stress from transport, dehydration, horses collapsing on the plane and having such bad injuries that they have to be euthanized right after they landed.
And that's between 2024 and 2025. And Mitchell now calling on Ottawa to ban live horse exports for slaughter. The CFIA says animal health after arrival is Japan's jurisdiction. The Winnipeg Jets surprised even their coach last night. Morgan Barron in the second period on TSN. With Winnipeg's only goal of the night, the Jets lose to the Anaheim Ducks 4-1. Winnipeg had just 13 shots on the Ducks' net. Head coach Scott O'Neill says his team had been playing so well since the Olympic break, adding they have now missed an opportunity to gain ground in their hunt for a playoff spot.
If we're going to get in, our top players have to be our top players. Said that from the beginning. But everybody else has to also play their roles, and it was throughout the lineup. I mean, the part about getting shots, we didn't have the puck. Anaheim had the puck most of the night.
The Jets now continue their homestand with the New York Rangers in town to tomorrow night. You can find more Manitoba news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Time for the regional forecast with Abby Adiyemi.
Yeah, Marcy. Well, the south sees a mix of sun and clouds with highs around -6 today. The north remains dangerously cold with current temperatures in most of the regions around -35 and -40s towards Tudula Lake this morning. Hence, that's a cold warning we still have for that region. Wind chills in the valleys of -45 close to -51 this morning. For the Red River Valley region, we're hovering between -13 at the Forks, -19 at the airport. Some clear conditions out there, just spotting some clouds here and there. Temperatures will hover around -15 for most of the morning. Expect some clouds to roll in. Then we warm up to that high of -6. They are seasonal for this time of the year. We're usually around -2. And the morning wind chill is something you should take into consideration. It's going to feel like -24 in the city. For the Pembina Valley region, similar conditions we're seeing there. A few clouds, -10 at this time, warming up to -4. Brandon towards Nipper, we're tracking -10 there. Light snow falling in that part of the province. You also warm up to -4 later. From Dauphin towards Russell and Roblin, we're looking at temperatures around -13 at this time. Cloudy conditions, warming up to -5. Gimli in the Interlake regions, we're seeing temperatures around -17, -18 there. A few clouds spotted, highs around -8. The Flin Flon surrounding communities, we're looking at temperatures between -24 and -29 at this time. We will see highs around -7 in that region, though the wind chill feels like -30 this morning. Thompson is clear at -32, highs close to -12. The Byton wind chill around -36. Gillam, Lynn Lake, we're seeing clear skies, -31s and -35s. We're tracking there, reaching highs between -18 and -12. Wind chill this morning around -40. And for Tudula Lake and the Churchill region, we're tracking temperatures hovering between -35 and -40 for the region this morning, and the wind chill close to -45. So it's that split again, Marcy. Sunshine and afternoon flurries in the south, while the north remains gripped in that dangerous cold with Arctic air still making its presence felt. Winnipeg, a brisk stats, we're seeing sunny clouds outside, a high of maybe -5 today.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Corey Funk has been watching the commute as always.
Yeah, and it's actually been very quiet this morning. No issues here in the city. If you are on the highways, though, the worst highways in the province right now seem to be around Lynn Lake and the Paw. We're talking covered highway conditions, poor visibility. So careful if you're on that. Other than that, if you're walking, biking, driving, you can give me a call if you do see something going on out there. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
So let me ask you a question before
Okay.
our medical column.
Mm-hmm.
How long do you think you're going to run? Like, do you see that as part of your life? Or?
I know it was about aging. I thought you were going to ask me how long do you think you're going to live. I was like, whoa, okay.
It is about aging, but it's also it's about health. So.
How long do you think I'm going to run?
Well, you run regularly.
Mhm.
So I'm wondering if that, because you compete, because you do trail runs and
Yeah.
races, but is that something that's part of the fabric of how you think you're going to age? Like, will you continue doing that?
I think I'd like to run for as long as I can, and then
Yeah.
I'll probably just take up hopefully biking or something like that. If but I know there's a kind of a long-standing myth that running is bad for your knees.
Got it.
And I know there's some people who do have knee injuries, of course, from
Yeah.
running in long terms. But I found for trail running, at least, I think I know a lot of people who've been running into their 60s, 70s in the community.
And where does that commitment come from to sort of age with activity?
I
Is it
think
just you, or is it come like?
I think it's just it's looking at yourself, and I see. I think it's mostly you see other people in the community who are doing it, and you think, hey, I want to be like that.
Yeah.
You know, when in their 60s, 70s, getting out there doing. We had someone on the show who did 100-miler in her 70s, right?
Inspired by that.
It's inspiring. You can see that they're happy, they're moving, and it keeps you happy and moving too. Well,
Yeah, I had a friend that used to say motion is the lotion. Like, if you can just move, right? If you can just figure out a way to get yourself, whatever it is. If it's not a run like Corey, like a walk,
right,
into your later years,
and it
make
gets
a
you
difference.
out, right?
Yeah.
And it gets you thinking, and gets your brain something to think about too.
So Corey and I are talking about this because he's right. Our column today on the medical, on our medical column, it is all about aging, but it is also looking not just at the physical, but the mental aspects of aging well and aging healthfully, if you're lucky enough to do so. So often we think of aging is thought of as a gradual decline in both body and mind, but there's this new research out from scientists at Yale University, and it actually suggests otherwise. Their results show that many seniors improve over time time. And attitudes about aging might be playing a role as well as activity. And Dr. Raj Bhardwaj spoke to us all about it.
Good morning, Marcy.
So I like this. It feels positive. Tell us about this study.
Yeah, so the researchers looked at over 11,000 volunteers. They were all 65 years old or older, and they were enrolled in the U.S. Health and Retirement Study. So they had the researchers track changes in their thinking and in their physical health over about a dozen years. And the idea is that, the volunteers did surveys, they had physical assessments done, and the researchers could see trends like, is their walking speed slowing down as they get older? Are their test scores on memory and thinking tests staying stable, or are they going down with age? The researchers found that as people in the study aged, about 45% of them improved their scores in at least one of those two areas, either physical or cognitive, rather than staying stable or declining with age. But the researchers noticed that when you average everyone's progress through the dozen years, the improvements of individuals sort of disappear into the data. And it looks like on average, people, they do have declining physical and cognitive performance as they age. But there are a lot of individuals hiding in the data who seem to beat the odds as they age. And, that's one of the problems with looking at overall averages. When you look at data on things like this, you miss interesting individual changes that can happen.
Did researchers figure out why some people beat the odds and others didn't?
Yeah, so when they started this study, the researchers specifically wanted to see if a person's attitudes towards aging would be correlated to their changes as they got older. So they controlled for things like age and sex and education and chronic disease, all sorts of things. And after they accounted for all of that, they found that having positive beliefs about aging was associated with improved memory, or at least less decline in memory, faster walking speed over the years, even lower risk of heart attacks and strokes. Now, it's really important. This study cannot assign cause and effect. This is just correlation. And I think that's important because it can be pretty tempting to sort of blame someone's poor aging or poor health on a bad attitude.
Got it.
And I don't think that's a particularly helpful approach to caring for people. It could be just that people who are generally aging well tend to have better attitudes about aging, right?
Can we dig into attitudes toward aging that are positive? What kinds of attitudes were they accounting for or looking at in the study?
So in this study, they had volunteers fill out surveys that used part of a standardized survey that's been around for decades. It's called the Philadelphia Geriatric Morale Scale. And there are 5 simple statements. People either agreed or disagreed. One of those sort of strongly agree, agree, disagree,
like
strongly disagree. Yeah. So I'll tell you the 5. You can think about your attitudes towards aging. You ready?
I'm ready.
Things keep getting worse as I get older. I have as much pep as I did last year. As you get older, you are less useful. As I get older, things are better than I thought they'd be. I'm as happy now as when I was younger. Now, when I was reading those, I was thinking, man, it would be interesting to ask those questions to people in their 40s and 50s, because I think even by that age, a bunch of us are building our attitudes about aging through, our early experiences. And there's sort of 2 approaches here. On the one hand, it might be that healthier people will feel more positive about their aging because they're healthy, right? They haven't noticed aches and pains or injuries or whatever, not to mention, been diagnosed with chronic conditions. But on the other hand, you could say, no, but when healthier people hit a speed bump, of an injury or getting diagnosed with hypertension or something, maybe their morale will tank because they've been healthy all their lives, right? So it's a nuanced kind of thing.
What kinds of things can people do to optimize their health and wellness as they age?
So, it's kind of like Ted Lasso. And according to this study, it helps if you believe, but I would say it helps if you realize that people can and do improve as they get older rather than, just this gradual decline into your older years. Apart from that, I think there's some very concrete things you can do. You can build healthy habits around 4 key parts of your life: physical activity, sleep, diet, and social engagement. So the physical activity piece is simple, right? Move your body every day in some way. So that might be stretching and balance work on some days, like yoga or Tai Chi. It could be sports like pickleball or whatever. It could be as simple as going for a walk. These days, we're seeing the evidence of the benefits of resistance training as well, like lifting weights or using elastic bands, or even doing body weight stuff like push-ups. I got to say, if the benefits of physical activity were available as a pill, everybody would want to be on this pill. Second thing, sleep. It gets harder to sleep for 8 solid hours as we age. There's things like getting up at night to go to the bathroom, or hot flashes, or whatever. All sorts of things that can disrupt your sleep. So instead of reaching for a pill or a supplement or whatever, think about cognitive behavioral therapy for sleep. Evidence shows that's the best option with the fewest side effects. And then you can also talk to your doctor about what disturbs your sleep, right? There are medication options for things like hot flashes or frequent urination, things like that. As for the diet part, this is stuff we've been saying forever. Lots of vegetables and fruits, whole grains, and then plenty of protein, especially as we get older, but protein through legumes and nuts and fish more than red meat. We want to cut back on that red meat, and not too much salt either. And there's, in terms of supplements and stuff, vitamin D, sure, but not really any big convincing evidence that supports routine vitamin or supplement use, other than if you have a specific deficiency.
Before you go this morning, let's talk about the mind, because we talked about the body. So you mentioned social engagement. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, there's a lot of research that links isolation and loneliness to worse outcomes as people age. And it makes for worse physical and mental health, right? Now, some of that can be, for physical reasons, like, something like hearing loss might be causing social isolation. Being able to, or not being able to drive or something might cause you to be more isolated. But there are a lot of things that you can do to increase your social engagement. So, getting things like, your hearing tested and your vision tested and things like that. And if you need hearing aids or whatever, doing things like volunteering, with something that you enjoy, something like community gardening or whatever. There are often workshops where you can go and engage with other people and also learn things, which is really protective of your brain. So things like free workshops, free computer classes. In terms of physical stuff, there are walking groups. There's group exercise for older folks. I think it's really important that you do something with active participation rather than sort of just passively attend. Watching somebody exercise is not as good as actually getting out there and doing it yourself. And, just like they found in this study, we've got to realize that people are not the average of everyone their age. Everyone's unique in their physical and mental health, and we would love to beat the average as much as we can. And according to this study, believing that you can beat the average and age better than average is associated with actually aging better than average.
All right, Dr. Bardwash, thank you.
My pleasure.
That's Dr. Raj Bardwash and our medical column. You can hear it every Wednesday morning here on Information Radio. Well, still ahead on the show after 8 o'clock, how will higher gas prices affect your wallet at the grocery store? We're going to talk to a longtime Winnipeg grocer about that, so that's coming up after 8. Right now, speaking of traffic, Adam called the commuter line. He said southbound Route 90 just before Eagle Drive, there's a stalled car in the right lane. So you want to keep left to pass. 788-3093 if you do need to pass along something else. Well, next on the show, access to medical assistance in dying, known as MAID, is available to people whose death is imminent. But there's a process, and you need to have your application approved. Now, as you heard on the morning show yesterday, Valerie Penner says her mother in Steinbach was not approved for MAID.
She's going to die in the next while. It feels like the system just wants to kind of warehouse you until you do, so that you don't have to really touch or affect MAID numbers.
That was Valerie Penner, who says her 94-year-old mother, Marion, who suffers from chronic heart and kidney disease, should have been approved for medical assistance in dying. A doctor who diagnosed Marion's condition said it was incurable and serious, but Marion was denied. Now, according to a federal report, a third of Manitobans who applied for MAID in 2024 were also denied. The province's 32% denial rate was more than 5 times the national average of 6%. Still, the number of people using MAID is steadily increasing in the country, in other provinces rather. Now, David Shannon is here with another perspective on MAID. He's a lawyer and disabilities advocate from Thunder Bay. He co-wrote a report with the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. It highlights some concerns about the expansion of MAID to people who do not have a foreseeably imminent death. And among those concerns is a lack of adequate palliative care. Thank you so much for joining us and weighing in on this.
Good morning.
Good morning. So what concerns you about MAID being available to people whose death does not seem imminent?
Well, we've seen, with respect to not imminent, I want to first say at the outset that this is not an abstract discussion from my perspective, and in many and we've heard all too often the discussion comes from persons who might be assessors or might be so-called experts in the field. Well, I do bring expertise as I have worked and published in the area, but I have a C5 spinal cord injury. In other words, I use a power wheelchair. I have for nearly 45 years. It's not an abstract discussion. I know exactly the discussion around isolation, the discussion around long and protracted periods in hospital. I was only 18 when I had my accident, and I was months in the hospital. Different injuries since then have also found that I'm bedridden for 3 or 4 months at a time. Notwithstanding that, I've been also, and I heard your earlier caller talk about isolation. I had the benefit and the pleasure of being able to go to university, build a profession, develop community within my life, family, loved ones. That is critically important. And so when we talk about not imminent death, I have some very direct knowledge, and that does point to then it is not a failure to, I would suggest, not a failure to provide assistance whenever someone wants it, but it's a failure to provide supports, provide love and dignity in an individual's life, to provide options for socialization, to be able to provide numerous options in order to be more integrated and yes, to the point of home care, palliative care, social supports. We've seen all too often that it's beyond isolation. That's a factor related to poverty. It's a factor related to poor housing. For example, in the middle, still it's cold in March, isn't it? And if you can't get proper heat in your home, you're going to suffer. And when that suffering, due to failures within the Canadian system, that suffering drives a person to prefer death over life, then there's a deep crack in the system. All too often there's... Yeah.
Can I interject and just ask you, so if Manitobans are more likely to be denied MAID eligibility than anywhere else in Canada, and what you're talking about is, people that may make a different decision, they may not, but they may if they had all of these other supports around them to sort of change their life. How can, when you look at those, the numbers, outside of Manitoba going up where people are accessing MAID in other provinces. So I'm taking us outside the province. What are you seeing in terms of the supports increasing that you're talking about across Canada? Has there been a change in that to sort of change the social fabric for people? Have things improved at all?
In fact, there's no evidence of that social fabric, and there might be a correlation between that and the rapid increase in MAID. And also, you see all too often persons in the Health Canada reports, the persons lack adequate disability supports. They do experience isolation, and it's a moral malaise that is driving them to make the choice for MAID or to rush to it as opposed to so to your point, absolutely that there is a fracture, and there's no evidence to indicate that it's improving in Canada. Now, in terms of we might say that maybe Manitoba is starting to get it right. It's very important that if a person has a condition that is remediable or with proper supports can be alleviated and or remediated, then they should not be driven toward an assisted assistance in dying. They should be They should be remediated in assistance toward life. Now, to your point, though, we also have seen now in Canada, it's almost 16,000 deaths. We're nearly at 5%, about 4.5% of the deaths in Canada are due to MAID. That's a rapid increase in the past decade without thorough longitudinal study, without a further look at what safeguards should be in place. We've seen the United Nations rapporteurs, human rights rapporteurs come out strongly against the Canadian system, especially the so-called track 2, or in other words, made when death is not imminent. We can compare a jurisdiction such as California, where there is assisted dying laws, and 40 million people in their state, but it's, rather than 16,000, it's closer to just a little over 1,000. So you start to look at these divergences and certainly the reports of the United Nations, who are not, I would not say radical disability advocates, activists. They are, very cogent and thoughtful body that suddenly it does speak toward, this isn't about denial. The question is about how do we have affirmation of life.
Thank you very much for your perspective, David Shannon, and for raising what has been studied and what may need more study to understand what we're talking about when we look at the data. Thank you for your time.
Sure. Have a good day.
That is David Shannon with us live on Zoom on CBC, lawyer and disabilities advocate. He did join us this morning from Thunder Bay. It is 3 minutes to 8 o'clock. Coming up after 8, we hope you stay with us because higher gas prices could be affecting your wallet at the grocery store. We're going to talk to a longtime Winnipeg grocer about that. Right now, Heather Wells is in with the latest news.
Good morning. Well, 2 people are dead after donating plasma at private clinics in Winnipeg. Health Canada says it received reports of 2 fatal adverse reactions at Grifols in Winnipeg in under 4 months. Health Canada and Grifols say they haven't found links between giving plasma and the deaths. The man seen in a video getting beaten up by a security guard last month at a downtown Dollarama faces additional charges. Police say a different guard at the Radisson Hotel was threatened with a knife this past Monday. A source says the 46-year-old suspect is the same man from the Dollarama incident. We'll hear more coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
Thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
Minus 13 and clear in Winnipeg. Westbound Jubilee just past Riverside Drive in the legally parked car. Also, Adam called the commuter line southbound Route 90 just before Eagle Drive. There's a stalled car in the right lane, so there you're keeping left. And highways around Lynn Lake, poor visibility and partly covered with snow. 788-3093 with the latest on the commute.
Q. I'm Garvey Bailey in for Tom Power. The legendary puppeteer Ronnie Burkett is back with a new show. Little Willie is a provocative and comedic take on Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Ronnie is here to talk about why he wanted to take on the classic tragedy and explain how audiences are making the puppets come alive.
I think it's about longing. Q, this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on CBC Listen, or wherever you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
13 years ago, Jovita Bydlowska wrote a memoir called Drunk Mom about her addiction to alcohol and path to sobriety. Now she's talking about how that road has been anything but straight and about the shame she felt along the way. Coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Ithel Musa. Iran is stepping up its attacks across the Middle East, and the U.S. and Israel are launching counterattacks. Video posted online shows smoke billowing out of a building. Several reports say it was an Israeli strike on a police station in the Iranian city of Tabriz. Iran is striking targets in Israel and several Gulf states, and it appears to be ready to take action at home, too. The CBC's David Common joins me from Amman, Jordan. David, what is the latest out of Iran?
Let's start with the message to Iranians themselves. The police chief in the country saying protesters will be dealt with the same way as the enemy. In other words, they will use lethal force should anybody try to rise up against this regime. Militarily, Iran saying it has launched what it calls its 35th wave of operations. They have targeted Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain, primarily with missiles. Often, Iran says, targeting American military installations, but we have seen multiple incidents over the past nearly 2 weeks at this point of them targeting civil infrastructure as well in those Gulf states.
Israel has its focus is split on two fronts given the ongoing conflict with Hezbollah in Lebanon. What can you tell us about that?
And it is very important to note that this is a conflict that does not directly involve the Americans. It has long been a conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. This is in some ways just the latest chapter. But when we have seen previous chapters, they have tended to target Hezbollah strongholds in South Beirut, a densely populated city, but it became somewhat predictable. In the last 24 hours, Israel has been targeting central Beirut, and that has thrown a number of Lebanese people into waves of fear because they don't know where is safe anymore. Families who have been displaced by airstrikes have been taking shelter in schools, stadiums, and other public buildings. Some 700,000 people in that country have been told to flee.
The CBC's David Common in Amman, Jordan. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are growing fears Iraq is being drawn into the U.S.-Israeli war with Iran. Pro-Iranian militias there are increasing attacks against U.S. and Kurdish targets. It's believed they were behind a major attack on a U.S. diplomatic facility in Baghdad yesterday. Margaret Evans in Erbil has more.
The risk of another front in the conflict opening up here is impacting already shaky relations between the Iraqi Kurds, who enjoy regional autonomy, and the federal government in Baghdad they say discriminates against them. Attacks on Erbil by Iranian-backed militias operating in Iraq have increased since the start of the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran, turning the spotlight on Iraq's mainly Shia government and its links to the militias, some of which have been trained and funded by Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps. We blame the Iraqi government, says Dilshad Shabab, a senior advisor to the Kurdish regional presidency, because they're not taking any serious measures. There are 2 American bases in Iraqi Kurdistan that have come under regular drone and missile fire, as have Kurdish Iranian opposition groups based on the Iraqi side of the border. Civilian targets have also been hit, and the U.S. Embassy has warned that hotels could be under threat. Shabab suggests U.S. forces themselves are already in action against the militias. They're protecting themselves, he says, and they're protecting others. But he also says the problem won't disappear until the government in Baghdad acknowledges its ties to the militias and reins them in. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Erbil, Northern Iraq.
At least 3 commercial ships in the Strait of Hormuz are damaged after coming under attack. British maritime officials say the vessels were hit by some sort of projectile. At least one of them is on fire. 3 crew members are missing from a Thai-registered ship. The rest are believed to have been brought to safety. In state media, Iran's military says it struck multiple vessels this morning, and it repeated it will not allow a single liter of oil to pass through the strait. Meanwhile, the U.S. military says it's destroyed 16 Iranian mine-laying ships there. A 4th MP has crossed the floor of the House of Commons to join the Liberal ranks, but this time it is an NDP MP. Laurie Idlaut's switch of party allegiance is bringing the Carney government very close to majority status. Janice McGregor is in our parliamentary bureau. Janice, there were signs this floor crossing was in the works.
Yep, sure were. Laurie Idlaut abstained on last fall's budget vote, saying there were things in it for her riding that she could support, and she didn't want to trigger an election. In a statement last night, she cited the new threats against Canada's sovereignty, pressures on the well-being of people throughout the North, as a reason that Canada needs, in her words, a strong and ambitious government that makes decisions, she said, with Nunavut, not about Nunavut. And that's why, she said, after much personal reflection, and she said the encouragement from her community, she decided to join the government caucus, calling Mark Carney Canada's first Prime Minister from the North. Now, when our colleagues at CBC North asked her about floor crossing rumors in January, she said she'd been asked to consider it by both Liberals and some of her own constituents. But she decided at that point she couldn't. Apparently the time was now.
Janice, it was actually the NDP that broke this news last night.
Yes, interim leader Don Davies got out ahead of whatever big reveal the Liberals might have planned for this morning, saying New Democrats were disappointed and she should put this to voters, resign, run again if she wants to be a Liberal. Just last week, Idlut spoke at a leadership event for the Avi Lewis campaign. Now, a seat that's flip-flopped 3 ways in recent elections is back in the Liberal column, poised to help tip the government into a majority. And the bad news for New Democrats may not stop here, because it's only Quebec MP Alexandre Boulris is openly considering stepping down to run in a provincial election later this year, putting his Montreal seat back on the table for the Liberals too.
Janice McGregor in Ottawa, thank you.
You're welcome.
A major ice storm is forecast to hit southern parts of Ontario and Quebec. As much as 30 millimeters of freezing rain could fall over the next 24 hours, and it could affect Ottawa through to Montreal and up to Quebec City. Cendrix Bouchard with Hydro-Quebec says crews are on standby.
Also making sure that we have all the equipment required. We're thinking about, electric lines, transformers, poles as well.
Many school boards in eastern Ontario and parts of Quebec have already cancelled classes. The City of Montreal says it's ready to activate emergency measures if necessary. The Canadian Cancer Society says colorectal cancer screening should start earlier than the recommended age of 50. Today, the organization is updating its official position, and it's calling on provinces and territories to get on board. Tashana Reid has the details.
I was diagnosed with rectal cancer at the age of 34.
Now 36, Melissa Groff, a married mom of 3, is battling stage 4 cancer. She shared her story with other cancer survivors and advocates on Parliament Hill. All of them urging provinces and territories to lower the screening age for colorectal cancer.
It's time that Canada makes that move.
The Canadian Cancer Society agrees. The organization has officially changed its position, echoing the calls to lower the screening age to 45 for people with average risk. They say the move is based on evidence that younger adults are increasingly being diagnosed with colorectal cancer, and more often at later stages of disease. Brandon Purcell is an advocacy manager for the charity.
Someone in that 45 to 50 age cohort is now 2 to 2.5 times more likely to be diagnosed than in previous generations.
Currently, screening programs across Canada start at 50 up to 74 years old, unless a patient is high risk. Dr. Shadi Ashmala is a surgical oncologist at Sunnybrook's Cancer Centre in Toronto.
It is not a disease of the elderly anymore.
Screening is done using a fecal immunochemical test known as a FIT test. A stool sample is sent to a lab where it is checked for blood. If positive, or for patients with symptoms, a colonoscopy is recommended.
We know this is a curable, treatable disease, always if caught early enough.
In recent years, Australia, the United States, and Japan all have lowered their screening age, something advocates say they hope will happen here. Tashana Reid, CBC News, Toronto.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. For more on today's top story, go to cbcnews.ca. That's where you'll find our live blog as well. I'm Idil Musa.
Good morning, Manitoba. How you doing out there? I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio, and thanks for joining us. Wednesday, March 11th, and hopefully you're starting your day well. Nice spring-like sky in Winnipeg. It's got lots of blue, some beautiful sunshine, and still temperatures hovering below normal, but our daytime high is going to be close. We're going to be around -6 for the day. Thanks for being here. This half hour on the program, we're going to talk about gas prices. They continue to climb. We're going to hear more from a Gas Buddy petroleum analyst about what that looks like in Manitoba. And then we're going to expand the story as we look at how that could impact you at the grocery store. We have a longtime Winnipeg grocer to weigh in on how that could affect prices at his store store. So stay tuned. It's coming up. In a moment, we'll have headlines with Heather Wells. Good morning, Heather. What are you working on?
Well, good morning. Well, the family of a man who died in a collision in the Arm of Roland Friday night say they are heartbroken and shocked. The car of 44-year-old Samuel James Decker with his 3 children inside got stuck in the ditch. Police say a 73-year-old man pulled over to help. He and Samuel were standing in the ditch when they were hit by another vehicle. He died on scene. We are going to hear from the children's mother coming up. And 2 people are dead after donating plasma at private clinics in Winnipeg. Health Canada says it received reports of 2 fatal adverse reactions at Grifols in Winnipeg in under 4 months. Health Canada and Grifols say they haven't found links between giving plasma and the deaths. I'll be back with more Manitoba News at 8:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Serious news this morning. Let's move to our forecast now. We have serious cold. I was just looking at in the north. I was just looking at Thompson's temperature, Abby. I know you and I are always looking at updating the temperatures around now. I have minus 35 there right now.
Yeah, and even if you travel further north to some regions, you will see minus 37, some areas around Thompson this morning. And Tuduli Lake is tracking minus 40. Actual temperature around Tuduli Lake this morning, minus 40 at this time, meaning frostbite in minutes. If you factor in the wind chill, it feels close to minus 50 this morning. In once you're tracking it from the Thompson, Gillam, Lynn Lake region all the way to Churchill, we're seeing wind chills in the valleys between minus 40s and minus 50s, which means frostbite in minutes. Hence, that warning still holding things down around Brochet and Tudula Lake, which is really getting the impact of those extreme wind chills this morning. But that should ease off during the day. That doesn't mean the wind chill is not going to be brutal. It's still brutal for most areas up north. For Winnipeg right now, we're hovering between minus 14 at the Forks, still minus 19 tracking at the airport. Clear skies, we have morning temperatures going to be hovering around minus 15 for most of the regions in the city today, though we're expecting some clouds to roll in this morning, followed by a high of minus 6. The wind chill still feels close to minus 25, makes it brisk for you if you're making that commute if you're making the transition from one bus to another. While across the southern region, we're still seeing those cold stats also. Brandon currently seeing light snow falling at this time, so take it easy if you are commuting. Overall, we are having more like a mix of sun and clouds in the south, and up north, those Arctic air still really gripping the regions with actual temperatures around minus 40s.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Corey Funk, what's the commute doing now?
A few things to keep an eye out for, actually. Sentry just approaching Ness. There is a stalled car in the curb lane. That's, of course, going southbound, so keep left to get around that. Not too many major delays there. Also, northbound Sherbrooke, there's some new construction going on there in the left 2 lanes between Portage and Ellis. Margaret called to tell us about that. So it kind of a bit of a bottleneck there, but folks apparently are zippering pretty well, but it might be a little slow northbound Sherbrooke this morning between Portage and Ellis. And finally, if you notice that traffic is pretty quiet through, or actually pretty backed up through Osborne Village this morning, it's actually for a good cause. Dennis called to say that he saw a bunch of firefighters doing the Fill the Boot campaign for muscular dystrophy. So they're out there going up to cars to put money in the boot there, right outside the fire station there.
By the clock tower, and they put the boot down.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Well, they got pretty okay weather for it in Winnipeg.
Yeah, exactly. So just heads up there while you're going through the village this morning. Other than that, though, if you do see something else going on, you can give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
Well, the price of gas has gone up nearly 25 cents a litre in the last month, and it might not just affect you at the pump. Yesterday on Up to Speed, we heard from Gas Buddy petroleum analyst Matt McLean. He gave Manitobans this warning.
The best thing that you can look at are your perishables. So we're talking the produce section, never frozen meats, dairy. anything that requires more frequent shipments to the grocery store, that's more susceptible to shipping cost increases faster than a shelf-stable item like a canned good or a boxed item. So look along that area of the departments of the grocery store, and if you see prices begin to increase, please understand it's not the grocery store's fault. It's not even the shipping company's fault. It just is what it is. It's costing a lot more to get that grocery item to the store. And unfortunately, we all have to pay for that in some form or fashion whenever we pick that item up and put it into our cart.
So that's Gas Buddy petroleum analyst Matt McLean speaking yesterday with CBC. He says that high fuel costs can ripple through the supply chain, as he alluded to there, affecting everything from how groceries are delivered to how much we pay at the checkout. And the gas price this morning is in range. If you look at gasbuddy.ca and look at Winnipeg prices, it ranges from 137.9 to about 141.9 this morning. So we wanted to find out from the grocer's perspective what this is like. Scott Schreimer is with us. He's the owner of Vic's Market out in Fort Garry, an independent grocery store that's been serving Winnipeg for some 50 years. Hi there, Scott.
Hello there, Marcy.
So I just want to know how this sort of supply chain potential to add to the prices, in the business that you do, how does it compare to other times? Like during COVID, we sure learned a lot about supply chain and issues with management. What's it like now? You know, the pressure that gas puts on prices versus the pressure that something like COVID might have.
Well, I think we're pretty early in this conflict with these rising gas prices to make a really accurate comparison. I think if we live in a sustained period of high gas prices, we're certainly going to see changes at the grocery store. What those changes look like and to the extent that they'll be, it's hard to say at this particular time. But anytime there's an increase in the price of gas, the downstream effect is going to be either higher prices, or the retailers or the suppliers along the chain are going to absorb some of those costs.
And when you look at what products are mostly affected, which ones do you worry about, or do you know from past, experience, potentially could be affected because maybe they're coming from longer, they travel longer ways to get to Winnipeg?
Well, like your previous comment about from Gas Buddy, there are certain sectors that are going to be affected faster. Fresh is definitely going to be one of those areas, but a lot of the commodities in the fresh market come from people who are price takers, not price makers. So they can't just because something goes up in price doesn't mean that they can react right away and change the price. I would be more concerned in what I would consider the more monopolistic industries in the food sector, like dairy and eggs, who don't have any competition, and the government sets the price, and if there's an increase in their costs, they pass that through right away.
How quickly?
Well, they can react pretty quickly if they see that the price is going to be sustained for a period of time, and the producer says, we're going to have an increase in our cost of production. That can change fairly quickly. I mean, we're not talking weeks or days or weeks, but within a month or two, I mean, you could see some changes depending on how bad the price of gas goes up.
Got it.
I mean, it's one input in the factor. So, it's not like you're going to see the price of coffee at Tim Hortons go up tomorrow.
Yeah. So you talked about dairy and such, and then you also said the fresh market could be affected also. Is that also something that you wouldn't see impact prices in your store for months? You said it's not like days or weeks.
Well, it all depends. I mean, really, we're all looking at how long this conflict is going to last. If they get some if they come to an agreement to end this war, the price of gas will probably react very quickly. I mean, if we look at the global oil markets, I mean, they've been all over the map, and going up to $120 a barrel and back down to $80. I mean, we have no stability in the market at this point. Once we see where we're going, I think that's when you'll really start to see what the market's going to do. Have
you had to put up any prices in your stores so far?
No.
No, okay, too soon, too early rather in the conflict to know. I wonder when you look at this and have to make plans, for the long term and look at your business moving forward. At what is the point where you would start to decide where you have to sort of diversify what your supply is going to be and try to find something maybe that's closer to home, if prices are being impacted by either supply or by delivery?
Yeah, well, that's going to depend to a large degree on the time of year. I mean, we like to support the local market as much as we can all year round, but there's certain times of year where it's easier to do so than others. So as you move into nicer weather, things become a little more readily available. So you try to focus on those things. But I mean, not to say that, the inputs affect the local market too. I mean, transportation, gas, all those inputs are the same for everybody. And I always say, if something has to come from California or Mexico, yes, the price of gas goes up, but that price is absorbed across the whole load of product that comes in. So I wouldn't want to say that the increase is going to be astronomical. It all depends how much the price of oil goes up. If we start to see $140, $150 barrel of oil and we're paying $2 at the pump, you'll definitely see a difference. But at 10 or 20 cents a liter, you're not going to see a difference in the store. The big difference is going to be what it costs people to move around.
Yeah. If it does go oil to $140 or $150 a barrel, what, like 10% in grocery prices up? Like, do you know what that correlation would be?
Yeah, that's gonna. It depends on the product.
Yeah.
I think the fresh market will be hit harder, I would think. If there's lots of contract locked in prices for certain other commodities, it's really hard to say. All I can say is that there would be an impact.
Yeah.
What that impact would look like, it's really hard to say.
Like I have no sense of this, of your industry. So I'm asking because I think I'm trying to say, well, 10% versus would it be 60%? Like, is there a range that or are we really in uncharted territory?
Well, I just think we don't know until we can put our finger on what the scope of this problem is going to be and how long this war in Iran is going to go on for,
Yeah.
and the destabilizing the oil market. It's hard to know. It's not like the oil industry in Alberta where their royalties went up right away.
Got it.
That's not the way this is going to work. This is going to play out in a more slow manner, and I think that the industries in general are going to push back as much as they can to try to keep the prices down as much as they can, because nobody wants to pay more in the environment that we're in, with inflation being what it has been, and with prices going up the way they have over the past few years.
Yeah. Well, at least we're getting into growing season here in our province. I was going to make you finish this sentence. If we could grow one thing here that could supply our local grocers, what do you wish could be grown here? I'm just wondering,
Well, you know what? I'll be honest. Manitoba produces a lot of products: poultry, dairy, beef. I mean, we have a lot of products in this province that are produced and grown here. So more produce would be great, but we just don't have the climate for that. So we have to accept what we can do and deal with what comes from that.
All right. Thanks very much for your time on CBC. We really appreciate it.
No problem. Have a great day.
You too. That's Scott Schreimer. He's the owner of Vic's Market in Winnipeg.
CBC Music, live at Massey Hall, the most iconic music venue in Canada. An absolute milestone in the careers of musicians who stand on the historic stage. And you have a front row seat. All right. A new season of episodes now available. Bahamas, The Glorious Sons, The Sadies, Field Guide, Serena Ryder, O.C. Elliott, and Chantal Kreviazek. CBC Music, live at Massey Hall. Watch free on CBC Gem.
It's snowing now in Brandon, some light snow -11. Winnipeg is mainly sunny, -14. And in Thompson, mainly clear and very cold. It's -35 in Thompson right now. Well, we're about to find out what's coming up on Radio Noon in the call-in portion of the show. But to get there, we're going to hear a little music from Manitoba country artist Jerry Sereda. Here he is with Backroad Therapy.
I'm like a kettle on a stove, something's gonna blow, life's cranking up the heat. I'm getting crushed by the weight of a million different things, all pushing down on me. Gonna crank that Chevy key, yeah, I got a buzz free. Give me some cornfields on my left, you singing on my right, whole lot of carefree up ahead, and all our worries far behind. Big old blue sky up above, some red dirt underneath, cruising with your girl in a small town world, getting some back road therapy. Take me back in in time, just you and I, and wheels were always rolling. Nothing we were chasing, no destination, living in the moment. Gotta get back there now, and this old truck knows how. Give me some cornfields on my left, you singing on my right. Whole lot of carefree up ahead, and all our worries far behind. Big old blue sky up above, some red dirt underneath. Cruising with you, girl, in a small town world, getting some back road therapy. We're just a couple miles away from breaking those chains. Give me some cornfields, blue skies, red dirt, and sunshine. Oh, give me some cornfields on my left, you singing on my right. Whole lot of carefree up ahead, and all our worries far behind. Big old blue sky up above, some red dirt underneath. Cruising with you, girl, in a small town world. Yeah, cruising with you, girl, in a small town world.
Jerry Sereda and Backroad Therapy. My favorite's mustard fields, personally. I love that, like yellow blankets across Manitoba. 8:27 a.m. is the time on 89.3. Well, next on the show, some things people just want to talk about, and this is one of them. Golden Globe-winning actor Timothy Chalamet questioning if anyone still cares about ballet in a recent interview, and saying more than that. Yesterday on our show, the artistic director of the RWB, the Royal Winnipeg Ballet, weighed in.
He said, I don't want to be part of ballet and opera. Well, no one's asked you to be, and very likely you don't have the talent to have a big professional career in either of those art forms. The truth is, live performance is increasingly going to become more special because so much of our world is digital and virtual that seeing a human take risk in front of you, the ballerina can not accomplish the complicated turn. The opera singer can not hit the high note. And that doesn't happen in film, for instance, where they can reshoot it, they can Photoshop it, all sorts of things can happen. This the immediacy of these art forms, I think, is going to be increasingly appealing to people.
And we continue to dig into how Manitobans respond to those live performances. Marjorie Dowhouse is in to talk about the call-in on noon. Who's your guest today?
Well, we are going to have some folks, some opera folks. We have a panel that's set up on Radio Noon today because we heard from the artistic director of the RWB. So let's also hear from the opera because Timothy Chalamet, as you heard, took shots at the opera as well. So we're asking you, the question we're asking you on Radio Noon is, do you attend the opera? Do you attend the ballet? Do you love taking in live art forms? And what do you make of Timothy Chalamet's comments? Which is kind of interesting because as I read more about what he said, his mother and his sister actually are live stage performers. So it's an interesting comment. So we want to hear from you coming up on Radio Noon today. What do you think?
Yeah, it sparked a really good conversation, right?
Yeah.
I think it also has made people stop and think about exactly what you're asking people to weigh in on. Why do you, if you do go to the ballet, the opera, other live art forms, why do you? What keeps you buying those tickets and going back? I mean, even live theater, right?
Yeah.
What does keep you going back? And we have a vibrant arts community, so I think you'll have a good discussion.
100%.
Yeah.
So call and join us on Radio Noon and join the conversation.
You know, those folks from Verdun are going to call with their active theater out that way. All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So between 12:30 and 1, that is when the call-in is happening on Radio Noon. Marjorie Dowhouse there, of course, the host. It is coming up to 8:30, and you are on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. Corey's just popped up some developing traffic here. So Century approaching Ness. Just to let you know here, a stalled vehicle is blocking the southbound curb lane. In case you've missed that, you want to keep left to pass. There are no delays right now, but you will need to keep left to pass. So again, that's Century approaching Ness. If you have anything else that you need to report, please let us know. We know that westbound Jubilee just past Riverside Drive, we earlier had an illegally parked car that caused an issue. And we also had Route 90 just before Eagle Drive. Southbound, there was a stalled car in the right lane, and keep left there as well. But those issues might have now cleared. You can give us an update at 788-3093. Your news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it's sunny, minus 14 right now. We're not warming up a lot today. We'll see some clouds move in this afternoon, a high today of minus 6. 2 people are dead after selling plasma at private clinics in Winnipeg. Health Canada says it received reports of 2 fatal adverse reactions at Grifols in Winnipeg in under 4 months. This includes a 22-year-old international student at the University of Winnipeg. Hematologist Dr. Ryan Zarachansky says serious complications from giving plasma are incredibly rare, which is why these deaths, he says, should be reviewed.
When 2 things happen, it's even more important we look to understand, is this a trend? Is there something preventable that can be done at a program level, at a person level, at a training level?
Health Canada and Grifols say they have not found links between giving plasma and the deaths. The family of a man who died in a collision in the arm of Roland Friday night say they are heartbroken. The car of 44-year-old Samuel James Decker, with his 3 children inside, got stuck in the ditch. Police say a 73-year-old man pulled over to help. He and Samuel were standing in the ditch when they were hit by another vehicle driven by a 17-year-old girl. Samuel's ex-wife, Miriam James Decker, says their 13-year-old daughter called her.
And she was crying and screaming on the phone, saying that they had just gotten hit by a car and their dad had been outside of the car trying to get the car unstuck, and suddenly a car came along and hit them. And now he was on the ground unconscious. She was screaming, "I don't know what to do."
And Samuel was pronounced dead at the scene. He was originally from Sierra Leone and was a support worker with people with developmental disabilities in Winkler. Miriam describes him as a dedicated and fun-loving person. Standing with the people of Iran. Several dozen demonstrators near Portage, Maine last evening outside the U.S. consulate. People chanting thank you to the United States and Israel, waving flags from Canada, Israel, and the United States, as well as former Iranian flags. Mona Saidi left Iran in 2020 and still has family back home.
And they say, Trump act now, President Trump act now for the finish that dictator regime in our country. We came to the rally to be their voice for our people.
Saidi says so far her family in Iran is safe from the American-Israeli attacks. The PC caucus in the Manitoba legislature is 1 seat smaller today. Dawson Trail MLA Bob Lagasse is leaving the Progressive Conservatives to sit as an independent. Lisa Dick was the president of the PC's Dawson Trail Constituency Association. She says it takes a lot of strength for him to go it alone and focus solely on the needs of the constituency.
I have respect for anybody that's going to take a move like that and be independent. I have respect for people that want to put their name forward and run publicly. It takes a lot of courage to do that, especially in today's climate. It can be very volatile and negative.
Lagasse says he has butted heads with opposition leader Abi Khan, but he did not explain further. A man seen in a video getting beaten up by a security guard last month at the downtown Dollarama faces additional charges. Police say a different guard at the Radisson Hotel was threatened with a knife this past Sunday. A source says the 46-year-old suspect is the same man from the Dollarama incident. He was released from custody after being arrested on charges of robbery and uttering threats. Now he faces new charges of possessing a weapon and failing to comply with a probation order. A new investigation by animal rights advocates shows horses being flown for slaughter in Japan continue to suffer injuries, illness, even death. Caitlin Mitchell at Animal Justice says they obtained documents from the Japanese government and Canadian Food Inspection Agency. They found nearly 250 cases of injury and illness and at least 9 deaths in 18 shipments between 2024 and 2025. Mitchell is calling on Ottawa to ban live horse exports for slaughter. Retired Conservative Senator Donald Plett opposes that, but says Ottawa should demand more rigorous reporting requirements and accountability when horses are injured or die.
Let me not make light of even one horse if they are being mistreated. That needs to be dealt with and dealt with severely. My concern is that we want to kill an industry because the animal rights activists have found a half a dozen horses were injured. They have not shown that they were mistreated. And if they are injured, let's find out why they're being injured and let's deal with that.
The CFIA says animal health after arrival is Japan's jurisdiction. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Let's have one last look at what's going on with the morning commute with Corey.
Yes, southbound Century, just around Ness, there is a stalled car in the right lane, so keep left to get around that. And northbound Sherbrooke as well, between Portage and Ellis. The left two lanes are blocked off right now from construction, so keep right to get around that. Might be a little bit slow going northbound Sherbrooke this morning.
All right, thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Abby.
Down south, we'll see more clouds roll in and highs will be between -4 and -8, while up north, still locked in those dangerous wind chills of -40s to -50s. Frostbites in minute. Take it easy.
All right. Big thanks to Sophia Peralta Barone, who worked on the program today, had an item in the show, as well as reporter Jim Agapito. In our news department, Heather Wells, Megan Ketcherson, and Joni Nicolo. Reporter Chris Guerreau as well. Our on-air team, Corey Funk and Abby Adeyemi, as well as our studio crew with Darren Mirage. Our producers, Nellie Gonzalez and Leif Larson. On behalf of everyone on our current affairs team at CBC Manitoba, I'm Marcy Marcusa. Take care and be well, Manitoba. We will be back tomorrow with another edition of the show. And stick around, because coming up next on 89.3 FM, it's The Current on CBC. Have a good day.